Banksy is trapped. As long as they're an artist in the public eye, they'll participate, contribute, and empower the very thing they hate without any chance of meaningfully criticizing.
And here's where he goes wrong. It's assuming that Banksy doesn't know this.
Of course, I think Banksy knows that. Banksy is a victim, and I'm exposing Banksy's poor condition. Banksy watching this video, going, "That's me. I am trapped. I am in the spectacle. I am a spectacle." Like, of course he knows that. All right, everyone. So, on the canvas, I can tell when people tag me on videos. And a long time ago, someone tagged me in a video 2 months ago, not that long ago. And it's a podcast episode saying, "Art is over." It's this thumbnail, more specifically. Artifact number 41 is is YouTube destroying art on the show. And then there's me here. The canvas is wrong about Travis Bickle, Taxi Driver, which I'd love to watch as well. Maybe not right now, because that's 46 minutes. Here, art is over. I think we're going to jump to the part where they talk about me. I don't know that guy, but I've seen him before. And I don't care what they have to say about him. I want to know what they say about me. And same for Travis Bickle. It's 46 minutes, so that may be a bit for another stream. Oh, there, Steve Shives. There you go. That's him. All right, let's see what they say about Mr. Canvas. By the way, I haven't seen this video. I've only seen the beginning. And then I played it, and I was like, hey, perhaps I should make I should react to it on stream. Hey, look at that. One video recommended by the canvas, another video recommended by the canvas, and one recommended Polyblank video. Polyblank, who's going to be on stream eventually, maybe next week, I think. We're going to play a game with chat. Okay. Haven't watched this video before.
So I don't know. I am going to play this at 1.25. Maybe I should play it at the regular speed simply because, well, maybe at the beginning. Okay, at the beginning we'll play it at regular
let's
speed.
just hear his YouTube voice.
Yeah, because this is there's a performative aspect here that we're going to talk about. So this is the Canvas channel.
Just look at how serious he looks.
Two things. First, let's listen to his YouTube voice. That's just me reading a script. I can't read as the same way. I can't read out loud the same way I talk conversationally. I can't do that. Okay. Also, the reason why I sound so serious is because I want people to treat the subject of this video seriously. I know on YouTube, we're used to, clickbait and being, what's up guys? You will not believe what's coming up in this video. But that's just not me. It's not my way of presenting. I prefer being serious, and I think being serious is not necessarily bad. Though I do understand that on YouTube, we often see that platform as a way of entertaining, right? I'm not necessarily trying to entertain. So yes, I am serious, and perhaps the performativeness comes from, the fact that YouTube is a performance. I think, I'm literally turning on a camera. I'm putting myself in front of a camera and I'm reading a script. I'm performing right now. We all are.
God damn, this stuff is fucking important.
Yeah. And also I want people to think that I think it is important, but I want people to, if they want to engage, they have to at least believe that it's important, right? I do think it's important. Maybe what I'm saying is not necessarily important to some people. But I do believe that it's by saying that it's important, at least it's going to give the charity of people to actually engage, especially people who are not used to engage with these conversations. Wear a nose clown in your next video, but change nothing else. A clown nose, sorry. Also, English is my second language. So when I read, I only know one way of reading out loud, and that's the way I do it. Why do you look so serious when you're discussing art? Don't you know you should look silly? Are you reading a script now? I'm not reading a script now. I'm doing my best at improvising. Can't wait to for them to put it in full screen so we can see chat at the bottom right.
One of the questions I get the most is, how do I analyze art? How do I appreciate art for myself? And I've always had a difficulty answering that question because, first, I don't think there's only one way to look at art, and second, I don't think you should rely on me to tell you how. However, I will answer the question here, and because I want to demonstrate the variety of ways you can look at and engage with art, I contacted some other YouTubers who analyze, appreciate, and break down art. I hope that after this video, you will feel inspired to look at art and find the most enjoyable and compelling way for you to analyze it.
Now, let me just ask you, if someone came up to talk to you like this in real life, would you be put off about it? There's a certain kind of creepiness to that. I could imagine he, I'll assume he's heterosexual just for the purposes of this. I don't know if he's gay or not, and it doesn't matter. But imagine he went up to some woman on a date, and after having a nice conversation, he was talking like this, and he said that she invited him back to his place, and he was like, how do you want me to pleasure you? Should I use my tongue as I spread your labia apart? I don't have to do it. But if you want, it's so affected. It's so, you want to just smack them upside the head.
Don't be violent with me. I'm just reading a script. That's not how I talk. Okay, he sounds like the food critic from Ratatouille. Listen. He makes fun of the way I talk when I have a script and I'm performing in front of a camera. I'm not going to make fun of him because that's the normal way he speaks. So we're not going to make fun of how he talks, and we're not going to make any assumptions of how his dates go with women or men. I don't care. He could be gay.
Well, I will say this. I remember, I grew up in Brooklyn, and when I went to college for the first time, I was in a pretty different environment, right? I mean, compared to what my high school was like versus going to college, completely different experience. And I remember one of the first things that I noticed just interacting with like the staff and maybe to some degree even some of the students, but this was primarily like people that were like, professors or whatever. They would do this all the time, right? This kind of affectation, or they would have these sort of things that I didn't know were like, maybe you can't call them catchphrases, but they're kind of like, they're like ways to sort of like subtly de-escalate a situation.
And YouTube commentary gone sexual.
Even if there's no actual escalation, it's just kind of like to be as inoffensive as possible. They might use certain words, or they would have certain tics in speech. I can't even like think of any off the top of my head, but I remember hearing that for the first time, thinking like, do they think that they have to talk this way? Like do they feel like this is like some sort of compulsion to be in this like professional setting? So I remember that being extremely jarring.
They're really, at least for now, focused on the way I speak, which is a bit weird. Because I don't think it's that important. They talk about college and university. I don't know if they think I come from a more academic background. I don't. I'm a fucking scam in that sense. I did 1 year of university before not ever putting my feet back in that place. I did a bit of college, and college and university is different in America. I imagine, like they're obviously American. He's from Brooklyn, but I've only been like in university for a year, and I didn't even like it. I didn't even study art history. So I don't think I'm being too careful to hurt people's feelings or whatever. Maybe I am. I'd like an example of it. Is it because I said, hey, listen, there's more than one way to analyze art, and therefore I invited 2 other, YouTubers to show how they look at art. I think it's showing the different ways of looking at art in a video about looking on how to look at art. I think it was good, personally. You're given different perspectives, and you can contrast different perspectives together instead of just listening to one. I don't know. I think it's a good, I'm not afraid that people will be offended by the fact that I'm just giving my perspective without other perspectives, because that's what I do in every other video. I just give my own perspective. Oh, hello, Temer. Are these artists I don't know. I think they're art critics. Maybe they're artists as well. They seem to be some critics on YouTube. I don't really know more that says sandwiches.
And a lot of it was like that. And I remember thinking like, this is nothing like the people that I knew growing up. Right. And, quickly I realized it was all an affect. Right. But, definitely like it is off putting.
I mean, it's kind of cringe. I will say a lot of these channels are these sort of like relatively young people who, think, oh, I'm interested in the arts. I'm passionate about the arts. Let me put myself in front of a camera and just sort of like, tell the world what I feel. But I think there is something, when you put yourself on screen, there's automatically a performative aspect to it. So
thank you. Yes.
Again, these are just young people who decide for themselves, I'm going to put myself on the internet. And I think it's clear that they haven't really trained themselves how to appear natural and comfortable on screen. And so they have this sort of like affected thing, which is easily seen through.
Honestly, I agree with that person. I don't think I'm necessarily uncomfortable on screen. If you don't like the persona or the way I present, that's fine. You don't have to watch my videos. And I think that my videos, at least for me, are more important in their content than in the way that the content is delivered. Again, on YouTube, very often, the way the content is delivered is more important than the content itself. But I try to believe that the content is more important. And plus, you only get better at doing this kind of stuff by doing it. I've talked about it in How to Become a YouTuber, right? You might suck at the beginning, and you might not be doing that great in terms of presenting yourself, in terms of reading. If you listen to how I narrated my videos in my first videos, it was terrible. A couple of months ago, it was worse than it is now. So, I don't know. But again, I think the content is more important, at least as they say, communication is 10% what you say, 90% how you say it. Probably why they haven't said anything of value so far. I mean, I don't know what the video is on. If it's to critique the way I present information, I don't mind. It's not criticism that I can really, engage with. Because if it's not for them, it's not for them. It works for a couple of people, right? Do I flex? Do I flex? It's been working for over 450,000 people. All right, no, enough. I'm not gonna do that. I already did it, but it's over.
I mean, like if I were to start a channel and I'm, performing some scripted thing about my thoughts, I probably wouldn't appear super comfortable, but like it's just so proliferated everywhere now that everyone.
I like this guy in the middle, even though he said it's cringe and all that. I like what he has to say. He's sympathizing or empath. He's sympathizing with my struggle of putting myself in front of a camera. It's not easy, and he acknowledges that. He says it's cringe. Listen, it might be cringe for some people to put yourself in front of a camera and read a script. You gotta embrace the cringe or just overlook it.
When it's just the people parody this sort of the like measure sort of like kind of hushed YouTube voice in which they sort of like softly lecture you through this or that. But yeah, I mean it's annoying, but everyone, you guys have already said enough about it.
So let's do 1.25 now, since this is going to get into the interviews.
It can be daunting to analyze art, but by the end of this video, I hope to give you the confidence to do it and grow from it.
I prefer a soft lecture than someone yelling into the mic, though. I mean, I've already been told that like I should be more dynamic in the way I talk. Conversationally, I think I have more intonation and more dynamic, right? But when I read, a lot of people have said they liked my voice and the way I talk, and it's really calming and it's ASMR-ish. It's not for everyone. It's not for these people, obviously not. But I've gotten a lot of comments that say they like the calmness of the videos. You won't believe what this Vermeer holds. Some people do that, and they're very successful at it.
As always, there's a live stream right after this video, and it's a lot of fun, so don't miss out on it. Oh, and there's also a Canvas Discord server. Check it out in the description. The first question I want to tackle is looking at art difficult? And here are the answers I got.
You know what I would say, like, if you want to know how to look at art, go and stand in a gallery for an hour, because people know how to do it. It's an instinct. We know how to look at art, or the best thing to do is go around Paris for the day, and when it's a school day, and look at the kids and how they look at art, and they know how to look at art.
Oh yeah, they might criticize both James from Great Art Explained or Amal Sandy, which is fine. I don't think I'll answer to those criticisms unless I disagree, but since they're not my ideas or necessarily positions I hold, because I disagreed with some of what both James said, so I'm not necessarily going to spend time defending what. Hello, Zeoduke. I'm so sorry. I can never pronounce your name. Looking at art is easy. Coming to conclusions about what it means is often harder. Yeah, there you go.
We all know how to look at art, but we pretend we don't. It's people make such a big fuss. Sometimes I think it took you longer to write. If you need to explain art, then it's not art on my channel than it does to Google something about.
Hello, Sneaky Revenant.
It's like it's not that difficult. Art is less difficult than you think.
So what do you guys think about that? I mean, it's to me, it's like one of those things where, you start off making some correct observations, and then you kind of like go off in the wrong direction. I mean, there is, I think, something to the idea that people natively do understand sort of what to look for, and it's also true that simply by being around either academic opinions or just kind of like popular pressure of some other sort, that gets very much cooked out of them, right? Where suddenly it's like things that they would otherwise feel like it's not something that might not be good, they might deceive themselves. I mean, Jessica talked about that before. I remember like when I was like first getting into poetry as a teenager, there was stuff that I would read that immediately I knew was like great writing, like the poems of County Cullen, and I wanted to figure out why. And then I would read like book reviews and poetry reviews, and they would like have like, I don't know, like a stanza of like some random contemporary poet, and it was garbage, and they would discuss it in like very highfalutin terms, and I would think, so am I missing something? Am I supposed to be having a positive response to this or a positive appraisal of some sort? So I do think there's something to the idea that people natively are probably better at it than maybe like the wider social fabric would allow, right? Because the wider social fabric, I just mean the sort of the art world as a business, right? They want there to be this mystique. They want there to be, something that cannot be penetrated. Because if it cannot be penetrated, they could continue, milking that cow, right? And asking everybody to come to them for an appropriate appraisal. But that final comment about, art is actually easy. I wouldn't call appraisal easy. I think it's easier than society might generally allow, but that's, very far from calling it easy. It's not easy.
It's part of the whole thing that everyone can be an artist if they really try. 10,000 hours and stuff. It's all bullshit. And I've seen that British guy. I don't know that there's a more Sayendi guy, but it's these guys. I don't even. If you listen to the way they talk, and I'll assume that they're both artists, at least I think the canvas guy is a painter himself. It doesn't give me a good prospect.
No.
I think my gut answer, my like hot take answer, is that it's hard. That it's something I spend a lot of time doing. It's something I work at, and engaging with the ideas. I give myself discipline. I mean, we both do, right? We set ourselves deadlines, and we try to learn the thing in time to speak articulately about it. Yeah, I do find it hard, like to give myself I don't know how to explain this, but like the discipline that we have to teach ourselves how to do this and to look at art and to keep on practicing and to build up that visual vocabulary. It takes time. It sometimes takes reading boring books. But I don't know if the value is so great.
I was super happy to get two different answers to that question, and to be clear, I don't believe they necessarily contradict each other. I agree with both creators because of the following distinction, and this might be your first lesson in learning to look at art. To put it simply, there are aesthetics and cognition. You may disagree with this distinction, but I think it can help reconcile both of the perspectives.
Oh, I think they're not going to like that, by the way. Because I saw aesthetics versus, I think it's down here. I don't know if they're going to like that. Let's see. And I said you may disagree with that, and it's fine if you disagree with it. Let's see what they say.
As I showed, there's a pleasure and a value in looking at art for what it looks like. There's also a pleasure and a value in looking at art with its context, its ideas, and its thought-provoking questions.
And he actually slants, it seems, on the channel much more towards this kind of like, sociological interpretation. But I mean, even this distinction, right? Like when people use the word aesthetics, I'm not like half the time, at this point, because like I just like, with Dan, he started his, anti like this like crusade many years ago. I've been on an anti like don't use the word aesthetics crusade for a while, but it's not catching on. Because I mean, to me, like when I think of aesthetics, right, specifically like aesthetics and philosophy, we are just talking about literally like physical responses to the arts, right? We're talking about pleasure or a lack of pleasure. We're talking about maybe how colors might make you feel. We're talking about, I like these
about beauty.
Yeah, beauty is another thing. Yeah,
is something about beauty is a quality. Beauty is not what anything is about. Beauty is incidental. There's a beautiful flower. There's a beautiful bird. There's a beautiful woman. There's a beautiful painting.
Yeah, and even the word beauty itself. I mean, it's so like I try not to use that phrase for describing artworks, but there are some situations where it just feels like it's appropriate. Like for instance, like if you watch the Killing of a Chinese Bookie, I think that's a beautiful film, and yet scene by scene, it's not what generally people would call beautiful, right? So, but in another respect, right, if you're talking about human beauty, right, there is obviously an objective quality there, right? You could make some assessments in terms of like facial symmetry or whatever, right? Granted, a lot of that is pseudoscience, but a lot of it isn't. So, it's one of those things where people use phrases, but they don't really spend enough time. Like they don't dwell on the actual definitions. They don't really talk about.
I don't know if I defined. I probably go into developing each of those concepts. If I don't, I fucked up and I should have. If I don't, I will do it myself.
The true distinctions in the way that they should. So.
To me, his aesthetics and cognition is just bullshit. Go back. When I talk about art, and I said evaluation, you look at art. There's really two components to evaluate: whether you're planning to write something or create the art, or you're evaluating the art critically, and that's ideation and execution. What is it about, and then how well did you do that? For example, one of the things that strikes a lot of people. I'll give you an example of an artist who's great ideator, but terrible execution. Philip K. Dick. He was a guy who came up with a lot of gimmicks for his stories. His ideas were interesting. They had some philosophical depth. His execution was totally lousy. He had no ability to create character. He didn't know how to realistically talk about these ideas philosophically. So he missed. He got point one, but the execution was lousy. There are other people who have some good ideas, and you can see that. Or they may not have good ideas, but they can craft well. They can execute well, but there's nothing there. I've seen painters, for example, who are very skilled and they can do this and that, and they're good with perspective. They're good with the place and characters, shading, chiaroscuro, or whatever it might be. But there's nothing deeper there, the way there is in, say, a Dali painting, Salvador Dali, or Picasso, or Magritte, or whoever it might be. There are people who are very good technically with poetry, but.
All right, he's going on. I have something to say, and I was waiting for him to end, but he wasn't. So it's good. What he's saying is really good. The whole idea of ideation. Sorry, coming up with the idea and executing them. But I don't see the link with my distinction between between the cognition and aesthetics. He uses Philip K. Dick, who had really great ideas but couldn't execute them. But he could execute them without them necessarily being beautiful, without them being aesthetically pleasing, right? There are some great ideas that are executed without being aesthetically pleasing. I'll give you an example. This one, Hey, look, that's my video right here. This one, this painting, in its concepts and its ideas it's an incredible painting. I absolutely love it. However, it's not aesthetically pleasing. I wouldn't argue that in its aesthetics, maybe you could argue that, but at least for me, the execution, I can't say that word. Ideation and execution here are done greatly. He had an idea and he executed the idea really, really greatly. But it's not necessarily beautiful or aesthetically pleasing. So the ideation versus execution is a good, it's a good distinction, but it's extremely different from the one I propose. And it's a bit off topic. I wish they could engage with what I have to propose, but I might go into the concept, so they might disagree with that.
They don't have that Wallace Stevens like ideation or Hart Crane ideation, but they're pretty good. Delamere, Walter Delamere.
That's the guy.
You look at Walter Delamere. His, I don't know, I don't even get into meter, but poetic meter I destroyed many times before. But his stuff is mellifluous. His stuff is gorgeous in terms of sound, but there's nothing there. It's an odorless fart intellectually. So those are the different kinds. So when he's talking about aesthetics, we're getting to the subjective, the beauty. We don't want to deal with things. Why, for example, would art be any different than any other human endeavor? Art, you can evaluate it good. You can evaluate whether a house is well built or not. There are architects. Who's the famous guy with Falling Waters? It's a beautiful home, but it's lousily built. So this is yet again. They always find ways to step aside from having to put their dick on the chopping block.
Well, what like they haven't heard the distinction that I'm trying to go on. Maybe they've watched the video before, so I'm not gonna hold them to that. However, the idea of looking at art for aesthetics and looking at art for cognition is an extremely old and influential idea that goes back all the way to Duchamp. I think I bring up Duchamp. I always fucking bring up Duchamp.
It isn't. I mean, he sort of says like you can disagree with it, but it is an unhelpful binary. I feel because, I mean, it seems to. I mean, that's sort of the binary that gets set up by these.
See, he's very charitable. The guy in the middle. Let's listen to what he had to say again.
It isn't. I mean, he sort of says like you can disagree with it, but it is an unhelpful binary. I feel because, I mean, it seems to. I mean, that's sort of the binary that gets set up by these two people that he's interviewing anyway. But it seems to set up the idea that there's art. You can only either be sort of like in front of an art and let it just sort of hit you as like a wave of sensation, and you don't cogitate at all about it, and that's how you appreciate it, or like you come to a painting or so. And this is a lot about visual art, which I'm not as experienced in. And then you have an education in it, and you can understand context and meaning and all that.
You can do both. I don't know if I say it because I've been paused on that freeze frame for the longest time, but I do believe you can do both. I think there are two ways of experiencing a painting, right? And they're two very different ways. You can do both. You can do it both at the same time. You can do both, separately. But I mean, I think that assumes that aesthetics of a painting, like color or figuration, can't have its own context or loaded baggage to it or a history. And so I think, again, like it's kind of a boring answer, but I think the real answer is somewhere in the middle, right? You allow yourself to be sensitive to the visual aspects of like color and shape and how a painter is, tracing this particular line or the shade. And you understand that there's always a history, there's a tradition of art and how it changes and how one artist might execute a particular aesthetic decision better than another, right? In that case, well, maybe they're against, like, for example, Found by Marcel Duchamp, by Marcel Duchamp. But Found by Marcel Duchamp has no aesthetic quality to it. He literally took a urinal, something that, is not necessarily appealing. And the whole value of Marcel Duchamp's fountain is not in the craftsmanship of the urinal or in the signature that Duchamp put, but it's in the concept behind it. I praise the guy in the middle, and I sound like a centrist. Insufferable. Right. So that's what I have to say about it. If Ethan were here, I'm sure I shared this video with Ethan. Actually, he couldn't stomach it. So
and based on what you said, there's actually something a little later in the video that we can touch upon.
An artwork can have only one of these two aspects, or it can have both. I'd argue that we can use.
There you go. I said they can have both. The guy in the middle agrees with me.
Instincts to appreciate a work of art for its aesthetics, for how it looks, and how it can grasp us emotionally. However, the difficulty of looking at a work of art can come in understanding its message, ideas, or concept through its context. Personally, I find more pleasure in looking at art through its context and by understanding its ideas, as I find that to be the most challenging and allows potentially for more growth. Can you be wrong when looking at?
Okay, I didn't expand on these concepts at all. I do it in other videos, but yeah, I should have expanded on these concepts in that video. I say a bit like, oh, I say that, aesthetics is about enjoying a painting for, how it makes you feel, how the colors or whatever, and the other one's about context. So I kind of briefly give examples of how both manifest themselves when looking at a work of art, but I could have done a better job at going more in depth at a work of art.
I feel like this might be where many people get intimidated by the idea of engaging with art. There's a fear of failure, of not understanding a work of art, which is probably at the root of the many messages and comments I get asking me how to look at art.
I spent my whole life around art. I've worked for the highest end galleries. I studied fine art at college. I became an artist. I was the worst artist in the world. And, I've kind of done it all. And it's, and I still don't understand what's going on.
I mean, that's kind of a crazy thing to say, right? He has a YouTube channel, Great Art Explained, what is it, close to like 1 million subscribers. And he says, I have no idea what I'm looking at. That's a problem. I mean, that's the thing. Like, and they're turning
but
that
I get plenty of poon, Alex. I get poon.
Like, think about it. They're turning that into like a fucking, like it's something noble about it, right? Like, I have all these subscribers. I'm putting out all these messages. I don't really know what I'm looking at, but it's okay because we're all in it together. I'm the only one getting.
He did say he didn't know what he was looking at all the time.
Into like a fucking explain what is it?
I've worked for the highest end galleries. I studied fine art at college. I became an artist. I was the worst artist in the world. And, I've kind of done it all. And it's, and I still don't understand what's going on.
I mean, that's kind of a crazy thing to say, right?
He didn't say he doesn't know what's going on in like specific paintings that he analyzes. I think it could be, there's a more charitable way to look at
negative traits as like something positive and aspirational. It's just so. This is why, honestly, this is why I didn't want to watch these videos. I knew the shit. It was going to be something I'll have to deal with, right? And I hate this passing off of these qualities as if it's positive. It's not.
I
don't think it's a positive to necessarily, let's say I don't know what's going on. It's a positive in the sense that you're not coming off as someone who says I know everything and therefore follow me. I think the reason why people say, for example, oh, I'm a fucking idiot, or oh, I don't know what's going on, or all these things, sometimes it's to de-responsibilize themselves from what they have to say, which is bad. But I think often as well, and I think that's the good part of it, I think often is to say, it's to inspire critical thought in the viewer, right? If I say, yeah, this is my analysis, I don't fucking know, I could be wrong, or I have no fucking clue, then it makes you have to doubt about the analysis that I gave, right? It doesn't mean that the analysis is less important or less interesting. It just means that there's room for criticism, and I'm opening up that criticism and saying, go ahead, criticize me. I'm not being there with the authority of being a YouTuber and saying, yeah, I know what's going on. I know everything about the art world and everything about this painting. It's basically saying, it's basically opening the door up for people to engage and to criticize.
Yeah, people quite often ask me, what do I like about art? What kind of work do I like? I hate people say, what's your favorite? Because, that's, you can't do that. But I think, I went to see some work this weekend.
Say I like it, but not my favorite.
I know that the work that interests me the most is work that I don't understand. That is it. If I don't understand what's going on, like when people scratch their heads and say, what is this? What is Jackson Pollock's like? That's a really good thing. It's really good to not understand. It's okay.
And he doesn't even explain, right? Maybe there was something more to it, and this other guy cut it off. But he doesn't explain, like, okay, why is it good to not understand and just leave it at that? Why?
Or that abstract expressionism could be bullshit.
Yeah.
Bottom guy seems to be putting on a bit of a performance himself. I mean, it could be the way he is, but I think, it is kind of a performance. But like, I'm not gonna say that it's bad. You have to be entertaining. You got to get some views. I say that as after me defending the fact that I'm not after me saying I don't entertain.
Right. But that's the thing. Like, if you're trying to like maximize an audience, a lot of this it does really go down to, expanding. And you have to get everybody in, like you have to say that everything is equally worthy in some regards. Right. I mean, a lot of people are huge fans of Jackson Pollock. That's just a fact. Right. So given that that's the case, they don't want to necessarily, because that's the thing. Like, if you do start to isolate yourself in that way, very often what happens instead as a compensation is, okay, if you're going to start saying negative things about, abstract expressionism, you also now have to go to, I don't know, like right-wing politics as well, right? Because it seems like all the right-wingers, for their own, totally,
I think they're either centrist or left-wing, but I do believe they're left-wing from the small amount of research I did on them. Oh yeah, and to go back on what James said about about it's really good if you don't understand a painting. I think what he means by that And I think you can interpret it with charity and, think for yourself instead of waiting on the YouTuber to tell you everything. I think what he means by that, and that could be a great, subject of discussion, is among these people as well. They could, what does he mean by that? Instead of saying, well, he didn't expand, so that means it's bad. I think what he means by that is, like, a painting is good when you don't know what's going on or when you're confused about it, because it forces you to engage with it. In a way, it could make you dismiss it as well. But in the cases where it does make you engage, when it does make you do the research necessary, I think that's when you engage most with the painting, and that's when you can appreciate a painting the most.
Compulsive reasons, they hate one form of art versus another, but they can't quite explain why, right? And when they do start explaining the stuff that they're into, it's not necessarily any better, right? If you look at some like right wingers, like there's like a bunch of like right wing Twitter accounts for like the arts, you could tell like it's just literally the same as this, right? It's all kind of emotional responses, and they bring the politics in as a compensation.
Additionally, I think that there's something interesting about using being aware of your own visual habits, your own visual vocabulary, and your own visual habits when you're looking at a painting, even if it's completely inappropriate. There's a Botticelli painting that is of the Annunciation, and if you don't know, if you don't have the Christian iconography in your head, and you don't know that that's Gabriel telling Mary that she's pregnant, but you know college football really well, then it looks like Gabriel is doing the Heisman pose and is like threatening to tackle Mary, who's like a little bit scared and is pulling back a little bit, and just like knowing.
I feel like Mary's doing the Heisman pose.
But it's like, why would, even if you're really into football, that's all you know, why would you ever do it? Like, that's the thing. Like, he's literally like, on the one hand, it's kind of like, all right, we're going to be so expansive and politically correct, and we're going to get as many people as we can, under, this umbrella and into this audience. But at the same time, they're treating, like the beer drinking football guy as a fucking noble savage, right? Like, he's not going to be able to conceptualize art, outside of this limited world. Like, why would this is the thing.
He just said that it looked like they did the Heisman pose. I think that was a joke about the fact that, if you don't know anything about it, you might say, hey, that looks almost like college football, as a haha, not as a I have no idea what's going on. Is that Tom Brady or whatever? I don't play football.
Human being wouldn't do that, right? Even if you are just all about one thing.
But here's the thing. To go back to the Botticelli paintings, let's say that you just came from Alpha Centauri and you're an alien and you're looking at that and you say, well, it looks like a two-dimensional representation of the animals that dominate this planet. The one has wings. We don't know what that is. The other seems to be a female. It looks like some kind of mating courtship. And maybe those people write in their equivalents of art magazines about the art that they found on Earth. Well, that would be a legitimate interpretation, because there's no way, for example, languages don't survive, for example. In 10,000 years, nuclear waste disposal, they've tried to get pictures that say danger, danger, danger for people in 10,000 years so that they don't go digging in, after maybe a great pandemic wipes out most people. It's very difficult to find something that can convey something totally. So I would say that, if this looks like some kind of mating courtship between a human female and a somewhat humanesque male, that could be a legitimate interpretation from alien eyes.
And wouldn't it even be kind of true? Like, doesn't she get pregnant after this meeting? Like, it would be kind of true, like in some.
I think she's already pregnant, but I don't disagree with what he's saying. I think that's right. I think I want to make a video about that eventually, but I think there's like an art in interpreting artworks in itself. I do think that some interpretations will speak to you more than others, right? Like the interpretation of the mating might speak less to me and might make me appreciate this painting a bit less than if someone came up with another interpretation that might make me engage more with that painting. I don't think it's necessarily an illegitimate interpretation, though, that for the alien case. He's right, at least I believe.
Like elaborate way.
Yeah, I think he was the herald of Jesus, and God coming in, God raping her. Let's say it.
Just to echo, you don't even have to be an alien. You can just be a regular person, and you probably are familiar. You may not have grown up in church, but you probably know what an angel is. You're probably familiar with maybe somewhat tangentially with the story of Mary. And you can still look at this painting and appreciate things about it without the sort of the context of art history or Christian tradition.
And you can talk about the kinetic emotion of the
exactly. Yeah, I mean, you see that he's in this pose and she's sort of drawing back, and you could come up with a story that's maybe even different from the Christian fable and still have a valid interpretation just from the sort of like unbaggaged interpretation alone.
I think that was Amor Siendi's point. His point was to be to understand and to be aware of the way you look at paintings and see how you interpret them yourself. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong, but that it's good to be aware of the ways you interpret, and that and being aware of your own visual language when looking at a painting, right? I think they agree.
But yeah, I mean,
we're gonna make a video on the performativeness of disagreement online. When people disagree online, yet they really agree, but to get views or to make content, they need to disagree, because it's only through disagreement and clashes and conflict that you get views and you get clicks.
It'll be a long video, so I don't want to talk too much.
Pulling back a little bit, and just like knowing that you've got that Heisman Trophy vocabulary in your head, and that impacts the way that you're seeing that image. That is part of the referendum on how we see, and it's part of our visual vocabulary, and it's our visual vocabulary interacting with Botticelli's. And there's like an interesting conversation we have there. You're not discovering any secrets of that painting.
Hey, the guy in the middle again. He's nodding. He's our comrade. Okay.
But
he's
it becomes what about, like, how is it socially so ingrained in our visual habits that we see this thing in a completely inappropriate space?
The reason why people are intimidated by like art analysis or art interpretation or art engagement, I feel like it's because they might be afraid of being wrong in a way, or not having that visual.
That's true. I just said that.
But what you're saying is, even if you're looking,
hey, we're all comrades here. We all agree
at the enunciation through football, American football, like there's still a value in there, because it might not say that much about the enunciation in itself, but it's saying something about you and the way you're looking at art, and that in itself is a form of engagement. So
yeah, that's the thing. Like this total fixation on if I could just make it somehow about me.
Yeah, the guy saying, "Hey, I just said that," as if I stole his idea. I know he didn't say that. It's what it sounds like. It's kind of funny.
Well, at least that's something, and it's not something, right? It really, really isn't. It's the opposite of something, right? You're just totally expanding yourself past the point of it being in any way appropriate.
I think if I'm extrapolating, that's also like interpret artworks as you wish, and do and try to find value in those interpretations, whatever those interpretations may be, right?
And look at how normal he sounds, just kind of like just talking, regularly.
Of course, because I'm having a conversation. I'm not reading off a script. Sometimes I'm scripted, sometimes I'm not. It's really easy to tell when I'm scripted and when I'm not. Am I scripted right now?
Granted, maybe has like a little bit of that affect creeping in, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what I'm trying to say is, find value in being aware, like, because so many of our biases come from the way that we look at things uncritically, and we just like have our visual habits and we have our biases, and we're going to see things in places that aren't necessarily there. And the more that you can look at art and become aware of like how you see, and be more intentional with the way that you see, and like the way that you can learn about yourself through looking at art, I think is really valuable.
Or are they so fixed on how you sound? Because they need to disagree for this video to have content, and they can't disagree with what I'm saying, so they disagree on the way I'm saying it.
So, right, I think so long as you're building authentic relationships with the world through the symbols that art gives you, like
I'm being right now. I'm being more confrontational than I need to be. I'm mostly joking. I think I could have conversations with these guys with no problem. I think it would be very fine to have conversations with them.
You're winning. Like, you're not wrong. You're doing it right.
So what we got so far is that you can look at art through its context, or perhaps more instinctively, and that it's okay and even good to not understand an artwork. And even if you take a shot at an analysis and you're wrong, that analysis and that engagement with the work of art in itself has value, because it can lead you to be critical about your way of seeing. To look at works of art, you simply need to do it. James Payne from Great Art Explains says to look at art and let your instincts carry you through the experience.
I mean, and he's correct about that. This is generally how you begin, right? You begin by sort of like catering to an instinct, and you end by honing your instinct through experience. But the only way.
I agree with that, and I don't think you end by honing your instinct with experience, but I think you can also like look into the painting and look into different interpretations of it to, you know, to create your own. But yeah, I do believe that you have to begin with looking at an artwork instinctively. As I think I say in that video, you can't go into a museum, walk into the museum, and know all the context behind every single painting and know every different interpretation of that painting to really appreciate it. There's too many paintings in a museum. So what you got to do is just go and take it in instinctively. And if there's one of them that sounds more interesting than the others, then maybe you can go more in depth in it and do the research that's necessary to you know, to appreciate it to its, you know, full potential. But if not, you don't have to either.
To do that, right? I feel like the problem with this video is they might begin with this kind of like idea of the instinct, and yet they never go past that into actually honing it, right? Based on having some kind of program in mind, right? Of doing something.
Well, bad art and bad criticism.
Also, can you be wrong in analysis? Maybe when speculating on what the artist is trying to convey. I think there can be value in trying to speculate what the artist is trying to convey. Yeah, like one of the ways I remember, I had like 1 or 2 art history classes. I didn't study in art history, but I had classes. I remember one of the teachers really hated the seeing paintings as gestalt or gestalt. You know, the blotches of ink that you have to interpret, and that says a lot about you, but you're only interpreting in the sense of your way of looking at it. That teacher said, don't look at paintings as a way to try to find, at least that's not the art history method. It could have value in itself either as well. Maybe not, but maybe just not for art history. No, don't say you're joking. You have to create drama for clout. Yeah, I have to dream it. Okay, yeah, you're right. I have to create drama for clout. These guys are literally fascists, okay? or in Discord, people said fascistoid or something like that.
Serve only one good purpose, and that's to show what not to do. That really is it. And you have to be able to say, we don't do that. We don't make painting. This painting is bad because it's whatever it might be. Whether we're talking about angles or chiaroscuro, or it has a kitsch element that shouldn't be there. Whatever it might be. But that's the only thing that it really serves. And he doesn't state that. He says everything up to that point. That bad art and bad criticism, the only good thing about them is what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily. If I said that, I take it back. I don't think I said that though. I said that it can tell something about you and about the way you interact with that art, right? Wait, let's listen to him again.
Whatever it might be, but that's the only thing that it really serves. And he doesn't state that. He says everything up to that point. That bad art and bad criticism, the only good thing about them is what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
James Earl from MLCND says to practice, and with time, this practice will help you develop a visual language and an eye for art. So you're not afraid of looking at art anymore. That's great. You're ready to go to your closest museum and do what exactly? James from MLCND compared the museum to a church in the sense that the context in itself gives value to the artworks inside the establishment. I think a museum is a great way to initiate yourself to art because just through the fact that artworks are framed and hung in a prestigious building, this leads you to give more importance and therefore encourages you to engage more with these.
And by the way, this is true for better, for worse. When you go into a museum, you'll see artworks on the wall and you'll give them more importance because they're in a museum. It doesn't mean that they have more importance, but it gives you the charity, which, you're giving it enables in you the charity to engage with these paintings to their maximum potential, right? Like if I print the Raft of the Medusa, right? And I put it on my wall, people will not engage with it. People will walk past it. Nobody will actually ponder on what it means and actually be interested in it. Of course, the Wrath of Medusa in reality is huge, right? Maybe we'll take another painting. The Mona Lisa is a great example of that, right? The Mona Lisa is quite of a small painting. We put it on the wall, a reproduction of it, people won't give a fuck about it. But people, when they go to the Louvre, they give it so much charity and trying to understand her gaze, her eyes, her whatever, her smile, the mystery, how I feel about the Mona Lisa. However, the museum will force people maybe not force, but will greatly incentivize people to engage with paintings. Again, for better or for worse, some paintings suck in museums.
These artworks. So I asked our creators, how do they look at art in a museum or gallery?
I think for me,
If it wasn't in the gallery, though, it wouldn't have value.
What was that?
If it wasn't in a museum or a highfalutin gallery, it wouldn't have value. That's implicit in what he just stated.
No, not at all. No, not at all. That would be greatly mischaracterizing what I've said. You can, if I say it gives it value, maybe I should have been more clear so that people don't misconstrue it. Every time I say something, I have to elaborate on it. I'm like, people are going to misconstrue it. People are going to misinterpret it. I've got to be more detailed. And then people in chat make fun of me for doing that. People in chat are like, ha ha, look at Mr. Canvas being afraid of having their statement misconstrued. Hear me saying, yeah, art in the museum is going to be given more value just because the museum is prestigious and all that. And it's like, all right, well, if art is in a museum, then it has no value to you? Or if art is not in a gallery, it has no value to you? That's why we are here.
And he doesn't even recognize it.
No, I don't recognize it. I get fuck. Okay, let's move on.
It's what appeals to me visually. So I would quite often.
I wanted to make that joke earlier, Pyro Anarchist. Maybe they should have actually written a script and analyzed what you said. I didn't write a script and analyze what they said. Maybe I've missed some things about this as well. See, this is not me going, oh, it's so virtuous to say that I might have missed it. You know, it's actually me saying, hey, I could be wrong. You can use your critical thinking. I'm allowing you to use your critical thinking. I never make fun of you for that. I always show my solidarity with your disclaimers. Thank you, Pyro Anarchist. Thank you very much. Thank you for the solidarity.
Say to people that if you get a group of 50 people together, then more often than not, they will gravitate towards the great art. More often than not. And there's a reason for that. It's sometimes it's visual, sometimes it's color, lots of different reasons. But I think for me, I approach it as I think most people do, from a visual angle, first of all. I would say that. And then...
well, he didn't even, this thing, like, so I can sort of understand what he's saying in the sense that, well, I mean, there's a few things. First of all, if you're in a museum, especially if you're like...
I'll pause it. Not because I disagree with what he was saying, but because I think people gravitate to the great art very, very often, not because it's visually important or whatever, but it's because it's popular and they want to go see the popular paintings. That's my saying. Like, Mona Lisa is the best example for that, right? But people will try to go to, or will gravitate around paintings that they've seen already because they want to see it in real life. They want to take selfies with it. They want to take pictures that they can put on Instagram.
In a museum like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is primarily older paintings, right? Time has passed, right? So they have already been sort of picked by posterity, which means that on average, you know, a painting in the Metropolitan Museum of Art is going to be most likely better than some, you know, random painting you might find in, you know, a contemporary gallery from, like, you know, artists of the last 5 years, right? Because we didn't have the benefit of time, right? So there's that element to it, but
that's true. There's a filter. There's a curation that's done with time. Though there are some great paintings that have been forgotten more by the greater public.
He also didn't even examine like they would gravitate towards great art. Okay, which means what? And he said, you know, the colors are like, but what exactly are we talking about? And like a lot of these very important terms don't actually get defined. And if they are defined, you know, such as like the cognition versus aesthetics thing, like they don't dwell long enough to even explain, you know, all the caveats and everything else they have to throw in any kind of discussion like this, right? It's like,
yeah, I recognize that I should have talked more about it. I've talked about it so many times on my channel. So sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm not going to go that much into explaining cognition versus aesthetics, which is a theme that I always bring up and I always take Marcel Duchamp as an example. It's like, eventually I'm redoing the same goddamn video every single time. Like, I want to move on to different topics. But yeah, like for someone who sees it for the first time, I understand. I should have maybe went into more, or at the very least, you know, direct my viewers or the viewers of that video to the video on, you know, I think I don't remember which video was on, you know, aesthetics or about retinal art versus, you know, more of a cognitive art. I didn't even mention retinal art, which I should have.
We have to push this through over the course of 26 minutes and 45 seconds. And, that's just not going to be sufficient.
Implicit in what the British guy is saying is,
That's true though. And like, also like, you don't want to make the video over, like, depending on your format, on your channel format, sometimes you can't have the discussions on, for over an hour, or for, which sometimes they require that. So yeah, you have to, pack some information, but that's for any media, unless you want to make, 6-hour streams on a very specific topic, which is doable, but you might not have the, you might not get the reach and the, that you would like.
Is that context helps art? That if it's in a prestigious building, if it's really well lit, that was going to bias people who think it must be good. Something's wrong with me. Jessica talks about this all the time, about how with writing or whatnot, she would go to a teacher might feature something, and Jessica would be like, well, this is clearly bad, and this is making me question myself in the negative way, because something might obviously be bad. I remember over the years I've gotten many emails from people where they'll send a poem, they'll send 7 or 8 poems, and here and there one will say, oh, and it might be bad, or the one might be good, or there might be one good out of 6 poems. And someone said, that poem that I sent you was actually written by famous poet so-and-so. And sometimes I've known that. Other times I haven't, because I don't know every poem. But I'd say, yeah, but I wrote you and said what didn't work about this poem. It doesn't matter whether this was written by W.B. Yeats or by you. It's not a good poem. They're trying to trip me up, to score some point. But it's like, it doesn't matter. This guy, though, he thinks that putting it in a prestigious building, featuring an artwork, if it's there, it must be good. This is the same mentality that the Salonistas back in this 19th century France had, that somehow art builds upon itself. I've had people, there was one guy, I remember, I actually put the poem on, I forget, one of the British idiots that was about a decade ago, he finally wrote a poem. I unknowingly helped him here or there, and he thought, oh, now I'm in the club. I said, because you wrote a good poem doesn't mean that you're a good poet or a great poet. It means you wrote one good poem. It doesn't work like that. It's not like, oh, you passed the bar, now you're a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, like, that's the thing about writing, or about like art in general. To really view it as a practice, I think takes a lot of both the pressure off, as well as the kind of like, all the kind of like highfalutin associations just out of the picture, right? If you just view it as, art is just something that you do, right? Writing is just something that you do. The more of it that you do, the more of a writer you are, right? Anything external, whether it's like publication or cultivating fans, like all that is irrelevant to the actual kind of like a verbal task that we're talking about.
Does it affect me emotionally is very important to me as well, as to what reaction I get. And by emotional, I don't mean that in a good sense. It can be anger as well. I quite often get angry about art. And I think that's a good thing. It's good to get angry about art, or have any kind of emotion, really. So indifference is the worst thing you can have in art, I think. The next thing I look at is the label. So I love labels in galleries. I find it just, one thing is the date. I look at the date, and then the country. So I look at where it's from, where the artist is from. And then I start thinking about the history from that period. So I quite often look at history before I think about the mechanics of an artwork. And then sometimes the name interests me, whether it's a man or a woman. Sometimes not so much, really. If it's a painting from 1700s and I realize it's by a woman, then I start to look at it in a different way. But generally, it's the date
it's all context to him. He's basically saying he is incapable of engaging the art that's before him.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to say for.
He's what? Saying, oh, there's this painting of a woman from the 17th century. That's odd, because there wasn't that many women who painted in the 17th century, and even less were like actually, their art survived and was passed down. That doesn't mean he's incapable of engaging with art of the past. Let's go see stuff.
And sometimes the name interests me, whether it's a man or a woman. Sometimes not so much, really. If it's
hold on, I'm watching this on
a painting from 1700s, and I realize it's by a woman, then I start to look at it in a different way. But generally, it's the date.
It's all context to him. He's basically saying he is incapable of engaging the art that's before him.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to say for dates and getting some context, but for the most part, I mean, look, like even if you don't know honestly, this is probably why a lot of religious painting and stuff like that, or like, mythology painting, why I tend to be turned off by that genre, because a lot of it is so kind of context driven, right? A lot of it tries to use the context and the reflexivity as, kind of like a go around for the art itself, right? I mean, obviously a lot of medieval art had a very kind of utilitarian function, in the same way that, I've said similar things about rap music, right? The fact that it's so reflexive, it's a knock against it in the long term, right? Because
I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree. Hold on, I think my cat's being a little shit. I scared him. Come here, Ria. As I said, I completely disagree with it, with what he's saying. At least to me, the value of these artworks, and for example of rap music, is that it's so reflexive. That's the value. The value is right there. Art that doesn't need context, to me, is not art that is, and that's just for me, that's how I experience art, but it's not art that I can engage with. I need to know the concepts behind it. I need to know in what time period these concepts came about. It's different when it's from the 16th century than it is in the 19th century. Of course, you can look at it from the 16th century without the proper context, and try to reflect your own perspective of art analysis on it. But I feel like having more information is never a burden about a painting, and very often, to really appreciate a painting as much as possible, you need as much information as possible. And context is one of those informations that are crucial. And the more context is important, at least to me, the more in depth you can go with the painting or with the art. For example, if you can make art that doesn't need context or discussions to appreciate, I feel like it's the kind of art that might impact you aesthetically, but that's it, right? But I'm looking for art that doesn't just impact me aesthetically. I want it to challenge me in my conceptions of, it can be history, it can be my conceptions of, our economic system, it can be of, social experiences from people that, I couldn't understand their experience, right? I've just finished reading yesterday night. I read it in one sitting. I read a book about this author who's coming in 2 days to the residency here. So I read her book, knowing she was coming, and she lives in another rural region of Quebec. And in her book, she talks about the struggles of living in a rural area in the 21st century in Quebec. And I could identify with these criticisms because I live in a very remote region in Quebec. And I think the context of her being in the rural area of Quebec and understanding the nuances of living in rural Quebec makes you understand and makes you appreciate her perspective so much more. And going, well, if you need to appreciate her if you need context or information to appreciate her perspective, maybe maybe it's not that interesting, or not, it suffers from that, from that need of context. I think it benefits from it. We greatly disagree here. I'd like to know what his perspective on art is, because I feel, and from what he's saying, I could be completely wrong. I would like him to correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of his art, or his perspective on art and his appreciation of art, relies on more of the intuition and on an experience that is intellectual, or cognitive, in the sense that it needs to be experienced and felt without necessarily having to think about it and having to do all that kind of research, which only burdens the work, right? It needs to be appreciated intuitively, which I don't agree with. I mean, some artworks can be appreciated intuitively and they stop there. Some of them can be great, I imagine, but I would need some examples of that.
right? Because eventually people either don't care about the religion in the context of like, religious writing or religious painting, and all you have left is just like, the figuration. What are the figures doing? What is there like some appropriate tension in the fingers? The reason why something like the Sistine Chapel, some of those, I don't think every one of those like images in the Sistine Chapel is great or anything, but the core one of Adam being touched by God, that's a great image. Specific, you don't have to really know anything at all. You don't need context to really make that sort of determination. So,
yeah, and honest, personally, I find the creation of Adam a bit boring. There's some interpretation, there's some engagement that you can have with that painting, but it's pretty shallow in the sense of in the ways you can interpret and have discussions about that painting. And because of that, I feel like, at least in my case, I can't have long discussions and discussions that will make you grow from sharing and from talking about that work of art.
Some of the best Michelangelo sculptures, right? You don't even need to know the context to understand why it works so well. So,
yeah, we don't need to know the context. But again, I would argue that those paintings, at least to me, are a bit boring, and that's not what art. The value of art is not in the sense that it just works, it's just beautiful, it's just really nice. The value of art is creating conversations around that work of art, being able to receive different perspectives and compare your own perspective to the one of the artist. There's different ways of experiencing art, but one of them, and the shallowest of them, is to it just works. It's just beautiful. It's just nice. That's the whole, the distinction that I make at the beginning of the video between aesthetics and cognition, which is perhaps a distinction that I should have maybe pushed more. Or maybe they could have discussed it more, because I feel like it would have answered a lot to what they believe art is, and the difference between our two perspectives.
Context, it's useful in many respects, and there is I do think there is some level of subjectivity in the arts that when it's all said and done, and we get kind of like the kind of like a synthesis of maybe everything that we're talking about.
Yeah, have you ever heard a song and then learned the backstory later and appreciate it differently after? Exactly. And I feel like when you hear about it or learn about it and you appreciate differently, that appreciation that is different may or may not have more impacts on the way you perceive it. When you first just vibe with it, you just like that song because it's nice, because you like it, it makes you dance or whatever. But then when you listen to it, because it's a story or it's an experience about someone, it could be rap music, whatever. There's a more engaging, there's an engagement that's created through the listening of that song or album.
Maybe centuries down the line, I think there's going to definitely be some role for subjectivity in the arts, but it's definitely not of the kind that people are pushing for now, right?
So it is when people talk about everything being all subjective. That's the problem. In an objective universe, you can have subjective things. In a subjective universe, you can have objective things. But if you're saying that everything is subjective, well, that's patently false.
I was joking.
There isn't. If there's one objective fact, it objectifies a whole subjective universe because there's things to measure it against. Because if you have that one subjective thing, you can say, "Oh, that's a mile away," or that one thing has a certain level of brightness. Then we've got three objective things, and things expand out from there. Oh, how long has that objective thing been there? Oh, 3 eons. The whole thing. The thing people don't understand that. When I talk about you can have an objective, that doesn't mean I'm saying that everything is objective. As if I compare, like I said, if I compare,
what is the irrefutable objective fact in art? I don't know. I'd like to know, according to what this guy thinks, but I do believe that depending on your goals for art, if you believe that art has a specific purpose, whatever, that you can have objective ways of attaining that goal, even though the goal can be subjective. So there might still be some objectivity to it, right? So if you believe that, art is about solely aesthetics or beauty, right? Then there could be a way of through color theory or through, rules of composition, try to get closer. That's Herbert Reed, an art historian that I really like, said there's, objective measures of beauty. You can agree or disagree again, but there might be some objective fact about making something nice, about making something beautiful. However, the fact that art needs to be nice or beautiful or, needs to be aesthetically pleasing is subjective. So there's some objective, facts within a subjective goal.
Obviously, 2001: A Space Odyssey with Plan 9 from Outer Space, 2001 is objectively better. Steve Shives was wrong, but if I compare that to La Dolce Vita or to Persona, like I said, a Bergman film, you can make legitimate arguments that one of those three films is the best one. It's harder though, and people don't want to do the difficult thing. It's easy to say that Ingmar Bergman is a better filmmaker than Steven Spielberg. But, is Ingmar Bergman a better filmmaker than Akira Kurosawa? Then things get a bit subjective.
It's easy for us to say, but it wouldn't be easy for, the vast majority of people would say like, oh, they're both equally great, right? Which is like another layer to all this, right?
Again, like Spielberg versus Bergman, right? It really depends on your definitions of what art should do, or what, in that case, cinema should do, right? Some people might look at cinema as just a way to entertain you, right? And you'll disagree with that, as I do, but they genuinely believe that. So in their case, yes, of course, Spielberg is by far a better filmmaker than Bergman. Bergman's movies are so goddamn boring. Spielberg, he puts me on the edge of my seat. He knows how to captivate my attention, and that's what cinema is all about, So it depends on what your goals are for that specific medium, right? And you might be like, who would believe that the objective of filmmaking is entertainment, or is just appealing to instinctive to instinctive signs of shippa entertainment or whatever. But that's the same way I perceive how people who view art, visual arts, as an aesthetic experience. I see aesthetic experiences a bit as I see entertainment. What to me is important in art, and visual arts more specifically, is the cognition behind it, right? The way it can create conversations, blah, blah, blah. I've talked about that before in this very segment. So you might disagree. Oh yeah, Spielberg is objectively not as good as Bergman, but it depends through what criteria you decide what a good filmmaker is. And we'll agree on in movies, right? The objective is not entertainment, but we will disagree on visual arts. I believe the objective is not beauty or aesthetic pleasure.
Sorting out opinions from normie opinions.
And I think those are the first two things I do. They're the first important things, is whether it hits me straight away, and whether and what I think the history surrounding it is. And then after that, I feel like I relax a little bit, and then kind of let the art.
The context relaxes him, right? It makes it less fearful to approach the work.
Just lead me around the painting.
Can we
the context relaxes him
a little bit, and then kind of let the art.
The context relaxes.
Oh, sorry.
The first two things I do. They're the first important things, is whether it hits me straight away, and whether and what I think the history surrounding it is. And then after that, I feel like I relax a little bit, and then kind of let.
Yeah, the relaxing I thought was a bit weird, because I don't necessarily relax, but he says, the context relaxes him. I think the context is exactly the thing that doesn't make you relax. It's the thing that doesn't make you passive. It's the thing that makes you engage with the artwork. If you don't look at the context, if you don't have to do research on the painting that you're looking at, you're kind of being, I believe, passive. You're just taking in the beauty of the painting. You don't need to engage with it. You might be analyzing its composition, its colors and all that, but I feel like that's just being hypnotized by the painting. That might be how you enjoy art, but to me, I don't want to be hypnotized. I want to engage. I want this to be a conversation between me and the artist who made that painting.
The context relaxes him, right? It makes it less fearful to approach the work.
just lead me around
Okay.
painting.
Can we like, I mean, this is another, we're only 11 or 12, almost 12 minutes into
All right,
the
just
Is
run
there anything
through.
really here that we need to go over more? Some of the
I
other
don't know.
videos?
Didn't you send me this link?
No, I did.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody sent
I mean,
this link.
it was just I think it's just more to the point of the constant appeals to emotional responses over anything that could be objective. It's just, another example of that on YouTube and this guy, I mean, he later on, he claims that he sort of contradicts his own, and we've seen him sort of imply this, but he contradicts his own channel name by saying he doesn't even try to explain art, as if there's nothing there to sort of rally around that he can educate. I mean, he seems to be fearful of even attempting to educate an audience about.
Of the three of them, as much as the Bandana Boys has the YouTube boys, the British guy is probably the most annoying one, because he's just doing this to have money to go to pubs and meet women, because he's chubby and goddamn Susan, I got my own YouTube channel. Why don't you come home with me? I can fist you.
Most art is designed to make you look at it in a certain way, and whether you're someone who's
I'm the cringe one.
never seen art before or someone who's not a historian, the artist is playing with you, so they want you to look at it in a certain way. So then I start to think about how I should look at it, and they have a plan for you. You're really not much in control when you're looking at art, really. So which I find very, very interesting.
I think that is a decent observation, right? Artists, especially good artists, they do have a plan for you. And granted, there is wiggle room in this plan. You are supposed to bring yourself into it to some degree, your experiences. I mean, like we said earlier, right? Every time, Dan says like, oh, I didn't think about this before. Right? That's supposed to happen with good art, right? So, there's nothing wrong with that insight.
And then I start thinking about, how scale affects me. Scale is really important to me as well. Big giant work like Jericho, compared to tiny little pieces, affect you in different ways. And it's how I need to stand when I look at that. Those are the other things. And then I start getting up close, what techniques are being used. The technical stuff is always the last bit for me. It's always, unless it's, an artist like Cézanne, where I'm really looking at brushstrokes mean a lot to me, in that sense. So, are the brushstrokes smooth? Are they rough? Is there a reason for this? Are they visible? Did the artist want you to see the brushstrokes or not want you to see them? Because artists know what they're doing. And
like on some level, I mean, so I can understand what he's saying. Like, I'm affected differently by paintings of like a large scale, but really the thing that you're supposed to see in that situation as well. If an artist has small portraits and then he has like a huge painting that takes up, I don't know, like 100 feet or whatever it might be, that just speaks to the diversity of talent, right? Different kinds of strengths, different kinds of abilities. This is really what, contributes to the greatness of art or an artist.
Also, the whole idea that art and talent are interlinked. I don't know if he believes for all art, but in this case, I disagree with wholeheartedly. I think, when we talk about talent in this case, I think we're talking more about technical talent, which I disagree with. I don't believe you need technical talent to be an artist. Again, I'm referring back to Duchamp's Fountain. No need for technical talent to create Duchamp's Fountain. Yet one of the most influential artworks in art history, and one of my favorites.
It's not what he's kind of implying that, oh, maybe for some paintings I need to like stand on a chair, right? Or I need to sort of, get a magnet. That's not really, and it's kind of telling me he says the technicals is what's at the very end. It shouldn't like, you shouldn't be one of those like technical freaks where, you try to create greatness by virtue purely of technicality, because that doesn't work. But still, like it needs to be a bit more centered than what he's implying here.
Is there anything else in this video worth watching? Because
He really doesn't watch it. He really doesn't want to watch that video.
I don't see this. We're just going to be going back and forth. There are other videos that I think bring up other points. I mean,
Kulabje fell asleep. Yeah, I think this guy's also bored. You both of you. Welcome back, Kulabje.
I mean, Zeke, what else is there here? I mean, we know.
No, I mean, we can move on. I mean, I guess I would just say, just to close, he brings up like indifference is the worst thing you can be to a work of art. And sure, like, if you are interested in the arts and you're passionate about arts, you do want to bring that passion to the fore. But I think thinking about objectivity and resisting all these appeals to emotion, it's when you come to a work of art, it's not so much indifference that you want to bring. It's that separation of willing to look that this work of art is doing something that I have to sacrifice whatever I might feel appeals to me more, what I might feel I like more, in order to understand that there's something at work here that I need to figure out that's beyond what I am compelled by my whims to feel. And so it's not indifference, but it's sort of a coolness that you want to be, a coolness that you want to have when you're observing art, so that it's not overwhelmed by by you essentially. So even though, you're part of it and all that. So, I feel like they're just going to say more. And this video does come across as like, oh, if you're like a total novice, like just don't be afraid. Just put yourself out there, go look at art. And that's really the only thing they say about, they don't really get into specifics about technique, which I wish they did, but
I actually,
Yeah, well, like as I said, I don't really care about technique. I'd love to go watch that video. I don't think it's probably not linked. That was perhaps the best tip is to look at art and then do the research at home, even if it's just a Wikipedia article, and see how this research changes the way you appreciate that work of art and the way you engage with the world through that work of art. As James from Great Art Explains says, art sometimes needs context, sometimes it doesn't, so you might have to figure out for yourself if that work of art needed context and your research in the first place. Or, as James from Mauciendi says, through your research, you will engage in a larger conversation about that artwork, which is, in itself, powerful. And this is for artworks you see in museums or galleries. However, out of all the artworks I made videos on, I only saw one in real life. You might not need museums if you have the internet. You can still look at art, engage with art, analyze the way you look at art, understand the context in which artworks were made, and see how that influences your way of looking at art. All right, I feel like that video wasn't that bad. It was pretty good, actually. I think they move on to another video of mine.
From this guy? So that's the one that you, so maybe we could move on to, do you want to do the Banksy one from this guy? So that's the one that you sent, right, Dan?
I hate the feeling of being trapped in a paradox. For instance, the more you tell yourself to fall asleep, the harder it gets. The more you tell someone who's agitated to calm down, the more agitated they get. The more I tell you to not think of a blue dog, the more you think of a blue dog. These paradoxes can become traps when you don't know how to get out of them. It can feel extremely uncomfortable when you're stuck in one of them. It can be terrible to not be able to sleep at night, but what if one of these paradoxes prevent you from being who you are? What if they prevent you from being the artist you want to be?
Also, I talk about capitalism, so we'll know if, they're more leftists or more, right-wing. Not that it matters. I feel like, you can still be right-wing and be insightful about art. Maybe not about politics, but about art, definitely.
Kurt Cobain was a prominent victim of this paradox, and this trap has claimed yet another victim, Banksy. I'm going to read you a lengthy quote from Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism on Kurt Cobain.
Well, just right here, I just looked up the definition of paradox. None of those three things he mentioned are paradoxes.
Yeah.
I mean, a paradox, and this is from online, Merriam-Webster. A seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated or explained, may prove to be well-founded or true. So,
I guess it's not a paradox. I mean, it's like, I want to go to bed, and by thinking to go to bed, I can't go to bed. It might not be a paradox. Wait, could it be? Hey, we're gonna look it up.
I tell you,
if it's not like a paradox, like, I can't do much about it. I'll have to apologize to a situation, person, or thing that combines contradictory features or qualities. I feel like it works here. Saying, there's a situation in which you really want to go to bed, but by really wanting to go to bed, you can't go to bed. It's it has contradictory qualities. Anyway, I don't think, it's pedantic. It's sure. You got me there. It might be it might not be a paradox. I apologize.
you don't think of a cow, and you think of a cow.
There's really no investigation there that you need to do. Yeah. I mean, we understand why. Like, you literally said the word cow. It's going to be in your brain.
His premise of why to get into it is totally false. Not that it has any real bearing on what comes afterward, but just listening to him, I thought to myself, let me look up. Maybe it's like definition number 17A, but no.
But like saying, don't think of a cow, and you thinking of a cow, and you're like, okay, I don't want to think of a cow. I don't want to think of a cow, and you think of a cow. There's something that's contradictory in that whole situation, right? And if we check, it's super pedantic. A situation that combines contradictory features or qualities. I think that's a situation that combines contradictory features or qualities. Okay. I mean, they're the poets, right? So I may be wrong.
Yeah, but it's another one of those things where it's like, with YouTube, you have to, keep it snappy, keep it moving. We're 52 seconds in. He has like a series of paradoxes that he presented, according to him, right? Then he connects it to the arts more broadly. Then he starts getting to Kurt Cobain. And then before we even hit the 1 minute mark, he's pulling out a book called Capitalist Realism.
And the reason is he's trying to show, see, I'm smart. I talked.
In the book Capitalist Realism, they illustrate the paradox of Kurt Cobain wanting to revolt against the system, but the system loving the fact that he's revolting against the system. So he's trying to revolt against the system, and by doing that, he's contributing to the system's, effervescence, I guess. And I feel like that in itself is a paradox. If it's not a paradox, then whatever, a contradiction. And it's completely in relation to what I was saying before, of other paradoxes that have less impacts on reality or impacts on our social fabric.
Often about negative capability, the John Keats idea of bringing disparate things together, that once you bring them together, they don't seem so disparate. He's trying to do that, but immediately what he's set up is false. So he starts with a false premise. And so his attempt to try to sound wise or whatnot falls flat on its face.
What am I saying that is false? Because technically this is not a paradox. Like, all right, you try to do something and it doesn't work. You try to go to sleep, but you can't because you're trying it. You're trying to stop thinking of a blue dog, but you can't because you're trying it. You try to criticize the system, but you can't because you're trying it.
And another thing, it's like when you're pulling out books, it's like when I watch videos, like I want to know what you think, right? I don't care about some random book. I don't care.
What I think can be informed by a book, unless what you think isn't informed by any books that you've read, but making people understand where some of your ideas are coming from. And I'm just giving one example of something that's coming from. And plus, I get criticism of people saying, I don't want to know what you think, give us, I don't care about this YouTuber. Give us thoughts of people who've, actually written books or whatever. And now it's like, oh, I don't care about people who write books, to give your own opinion. And it's like, it's so hard to be such a big YouTuber. I'm kidding, of course. But it's like, I can't believe that you show your sources for opinions that you have. Wait, you back up your opinions with literature? I don't care about the literature. Just tell me what you think.
About authority. Yeah, exactly. Like, do you have anything interesting to say?
It doesn't give me authority. It just makes it so that if people want to read more into it, I'm just about to read a quote. When you make a case for an idea or something, yeah, sometimes you'll give a quote by an author or an artist.
Right. Because that's another thing. Like, even if it's an appeal to an authority where the authority is actually saying something that's sensible, for the most part, right, I'm looking for people that maybe have like novel insights themselves. So
I promise.
People who have novel insights themselves very often base their own novel insights on insights of the past. If you read any essay, find me an essay where people don't quote or don't mention an other author. Maybe some blog posts. Hey, I'd love to go over this guy's blogs and see, is he going to quote anyone? Because I don't want to know what these people think. I want to know what he thinks. When you write an essay, he has a lot of books behind him. Has he ever written an essay and had to source things? Has he ever had to write an essay and explain someone's thought to elaborate on it?
Capitalism seamlessly occupies the horizons of the thinkable. Frederick Jameson used to report in horror about the ways that capitalism has seeped into the very unconscious. Now the fact that capitalism has colonized the dreaming life of the population is so taken for granted that it is no longer worthy of comment. Witness, for instance, the establishment of settled alternative or independent cultural zones, which endlessly repeat older gestures of rebellion and contestation as if for the first time. Alternative and independent don't designate something outside the mainstream culture, rather, they are styles, in fact, the dominant styles within the mainstream. No one embodied and struggled with this deadlock more than Kurt Cobain and Nirvana.
The way that he describes kind of like how, resistance to a culture looks like, that's literally how it always is. I mean, that's just kind of like the process of change and synthesis. And like even like the ironic thing here is just how this quote is supposed to be talking about, this phenomenon of like everything being essentially kind of like, I guess, subsumed under I guess the rubric of capitalism and perhaps some other things. And yet, he's kind of like describing something that's even like pre-capitalism, right? We're talking about a kind of like long-term of how human beings tend to behave. And it itself is being passed off as an insight, as something new, as if for the first time, right? And he's not able to comment on that.
And when this deadlock,
Because that's not what the video is about. That's not what the video is about. Also, there was at a time when before capitalism, you say it's always happened. I would tend to disagree. A lot of forms of counterculture before democracy, before liberal democracy, counterculture wasn't allowed religiously, and when it was, it actually came pushed like revolutions. It wasn't subsumed necessarily. Maybe there's some examples of it, but when you're trying to be countercultural against religion, let's say the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, things wouldn't go well for you. It's not like the Catholics would subsume that. They might adapt to, for example, the Reformation later, but they didn't just subsume or embrace the criticism to deflate its influence. Same thing for like being against monarchies, right? Or being against, I don't know, any structural power of the past that didn't tolerate criticism or didn't absorb it as much as, for example, liberal capitalism does.
well, the language he's using. Yes, Kurt Cobain was a modern day Atlas.
In his dreadful lassitude and objectless rage, Cobain seemed to give wearied voice to the despondency of the generation that had come after history, whose every move was anticipated, tracked, bought, and sold before it had even happened. Cobain knew that he was just another piece of spectacle, that nothing runs better on MTV than a protest against MTV, knew that his every move was a cliche scripted in advance, knew that even realizing it is a cliche. Here, even success meant failure, since to succeed would only mean that you were the new meat on which the system could feed.
And I don't know to what extent it's just kind of like his own words, or how much of this is just like continuation of the quotations.
All that is a quote. That's why I wrote it on the screen.
But there's nothing obviously that prevented Kurt Cobain from doing something different if he had so desired, right? It's true that you are taken by things like MTV. At the same time, like one thing that gets me about so many people is like, especially when people have like a pretty big audience, wouldn't you want to like start doing your own thing and sort of like lead these people wherever you want to lead them, irrespective of like anything that someone else might think? Because like it's one thing if you have to like build up an audience, but once it's already there, you could literally do whatever you want. They're going to follow you. So
that was one of my. That's one of the things I say, I think, at the end, or perhaps after the segment on Kurt Cobain. I say that he couldn't escape it. This guy says he can escape it. I don't think he can definitely, he can do it so easily. If he stops doing music, he's revolting against music. There can be a narrative around that. If he stops, doing, performing for a label, if he stops going on TV, this is part of his his revolt, which contributes to his brand. No matter what he does, even like the ultimate unaliving himself was the ultimate like revolt against everything. Just he didn't only stop being part of the culture, stop being part of the business, he just stopped being, and that was also absorbed in his myth of the revolted guy. The more I listen to these guys, the more it seems like they just hate you. They criticize you for your voice, for your sourcing your claims. They misconstrue your words. They barely have anything of substance to say.
Cobain's angst was commodified. It became a product. So the more he expressed his angst, even if it was targeted at his own commodification, the more value he gave to that commodity. If he was pissed at MTV, that anger was going to be milked by MTV itself. There's no way he could escape it. Even Cobain's very suicide added value to his commodification. Now, let's talk about Banksy. His rage, or at least his indignation, is not objectless like Cobain's. Banksy has targeted war, authoritarianism, capitalism, the bourgeoisie, greed, and, more apropos for this video, the art market. This last sentiment is best expressed in a quote by art critic Robert Hughes, shared by Banksy. But the price of a work of art is now part of its function. Its new job is to sit on the wall and get more expensive. Instead of being the common property of humankind the way a book is, art becomes the particular property of somebody who can afford it.
Do you guys want to talk about that?
Well, I was just looking at my original comment underneath and arguing with someone. If I can, let me just read my first comment. I won't read anything else here, but it's like yours here because
He commented on my video.
I wrote, and this was back 8 months ago. I'm not a fan of capitalism, but this is a very bad taste. One, neither Cobain nor Banksy were great artists. It's interesting that not a single qualitative comment, much less judgment, was uttered in this video. You spoke about the art as commodity and art without once speaking of the thing that is the coin of exchange in art over the eons, quality. Two, hence you, meaning Bandana Boy, hence you are a commoditizer. Three, you fail to acknowledge that both of them chose to be commodities. It was not thrust on them. They were not trapped. They leapt inside the game to play it. Cobain's mental ills and addictions proved it was a bad mood for him, but he chose to be a rock star. He chose.
Yeah, but like you choose to be a rock star, and if you want to get out of it, like you're trapped. Like you don't just trap yourself like that, you know. Like, of course, you want to become popular when you start making music. Of course, you want to be, you know, popular when you make, you know, art. You want your art to be viewed by as many people as possible. So of course you're gonna, you know, you try to include the system as much as possible in order to have your art, you know, be watched by as many people as possible. It is a choice, of course. But then when you can't get out, or when you can't even criticize the thing that you don't like, that's the trap. It's not the fact that you got into it. That's the trap. It's not being able to leave it or criticize it.
To marry a rock star. He chose to throw his angst and domestic abuse out into the world to commoditize it. And no one in the art world takes Banksy seriously as an artist. He's an embodiment of Warhol 2.0. He chooses to play his outrage, even though he is immensely benefited by it with little artistic quality given.
When someone says no one in the art world takes Banksy seriously, you know that this person's opinion doesn't really matter. Like, all right, like, honestly, I don't give a fuck about the art world. Here, it's the influence of Banksy. Banksy gets, gets a lot of attention from the media, from worldwide people. Your little clique of the art world, oh, we don't take Banksy seriously. Like, all right, your clique of, like, you know, of a couple of thousands of people on their opinion of Banksy versus his actual influence and engagement with the world.
Given back to society, even more than Cobain, he's part of the problem. A sellout who pretends he's not a sellout. He's like David Foster Wallace was to the MFA writing mafia. And now, and look how you present this take. And with all the other ones, you use a wholly generic YouTube affected vocal style. And I go on about that, but yeah, this was one of the obviously bad takes here, and there's many on his channel, but this was one of the worst.
Wait, so you think that Banksy is not taken seriously by the art world?
No, he's pushing back. I don't think he is. I don't think he's not taken seriously by the art world. But even if he was, he's still very influential.
Because I mean, to me, saying Andy Warhol 2.0, I feel like generically, if you just ask people now what they think about Andy Warhol, they're like, "Oh yeah, that was a great, important artist."
Yeah, no one in the art world who I should say who knows anything takes him seriously.
Oh yeah.
It sounds like a good bunch to hang out with. I could just replace the guy at the bottom, perhaps give a bit more insightful critiques to whatever videos we can watch together.
They take him seriously in terms of capital, but you know he's not. Who's the guy from New York who was the well-known
Basquiat,
artist, the black fellow who died in the 80s?
Basquiat.
Yeah.
You know, if we are talking about, like, you know, they're taken seriously specifically because of, you know, the kind of like monetary value that they produce, like on the wall. He's critiquing this, but he's not actually offering an alternative. Yeah. He's not actually like discussing Banksy. He's not actually discussing Andy Warhol. He's not actually discussing the work of Kurt Cobain. And this, to me, it's one of these things where
I'm not discussing their work. That's not what the video is about. If you want to discuss about the work of Kurt Cobain or Banksy, go watch another video. I love all the comments that I get who complain that the video isn't about the subject that they want it to be about. All right. You talk about the similarities between the fact that both Kurt Cobain and Banksy criticize the system, yet their criticisms are subsumed by the system. But I wanted to learn about Banksy's art. And it's like, there's plenty of videos on YouTube to learn about Banksy's art. There's plenty of videos on YouTube to learn about Kurt Cobain's, influence and legacy. This is just not it. If your criticism is this video isn't what I want it to be about, then I'll take that criticism. I'll take it. Great. If that's a criticism of my video, I love it.
They try to be respectful, like in these kinds of, I guess, like, by organizing their thoughts about artists in such a way. And yet, to me, it's like total disrespect that the work itself is just never actually analyzed. I mean, if you are an artist, like that's the number one thing that you want people to do, right? Much more than, getting money, much more than anything, right? You want a society to somehow be affected by what you're doing, right? You want to have a positive effect. And if there aren't.
Yeah, I'm talking about the effects of their work. I'm not analyzing their artworks. I can do that in another video if you want. Write a little comment. Maybe I'll read it. Write a comment and say, hey, can you analyze this work by Banksy? And if I see it, I might consider making a video. If that's what you want, to hear, an analysis of Banksy's artworks. But this is not it. Very obviously, from the title, it's about the paradox that claimed Banksy and Kurt Cobain.
People to discuss the work itself. I mean,
the art market turns a work of art into a commodity, a rare commodity, which can make it a very good investment in the right circumstances. To some, that's a good thing. To others, it's a tragedy. Art, in many ways, is now appreciated not for its power, its beauty, or its challenging nature, but for its value and for its ability to generate more wealth for its owner. Think of Banksy's Central Park kiosk, where he hired a man to present spray art priced at $60. The artworks didn't get much attention. People weren't drawn to them, at least not enough to purchase them. However, had anybody known these were Banksy works, the kiosk would have been empty in a matter of seconds. However, this old man sold Banksy's.
I got a slushie from Bally. Thank you, Bally. Hey, Bally, hold on. I'm watching some people who are criticizing my videos and criticizing the way I talk. And they said, what kind of person could I bring on a date? And then they'd hear me talk as I talk in my Canvas videos and be even interested and not want to hit me in the face. Did you want to hit me in the face on our first date?
No.
No? Okay, perfect. Thank you. The hesitation is a bit worrying, but thank you. Oh, you can probably hear the cat. All right.
Artworks to people who like them, either for themselves or to offer as gifts. If Banksy had sold them, he wouldn't have sold artworks, but investments, high-value commodities. Again, to some people, that's great. An artwork can be both great as an artwork and as an investment. But to other people, Banksy included, this can hinder our ability to appreciate art. I would argue that because we are brought up in a commodified world, we cannot dissociate the value of a work of art and its price tag. So when the
Hey, this person's spitting facts. Commentators are silent. Spitting facts after facts. And also, people were talking about, I think it was Zeoduck. I don't know if Zeoduck's still there. Talking about the value of art, on the art market compared to its quality.
bourgeoisie estimates the price of a work at $2 million.
And it's the flavor of this slushie is red.
and when he says that's nothing, like words like we, what exactly is he referring to?
Nope. Oh, sorry.
Other people, Banksy included, this can hinder our ability to appreciate art. I would argue that because we are brought up in a commodified world, we cannot dissociate the value of a work of art and its price tag. So when the bourgeoisie estimates the price of a work at $2 million.
And when he says that's nothing, like words like we, what exactly is he referring to? Like he himself can't do it? Is he talking about like a...
When he says we are brought up in a commodified world, what does he mean by we?
social tendency? When he says cannot, like, is that like definitively cannot, or are we just talking about a tendency in society? It's just like a lot of like sloppy language. I guess, I mean, I could keep going on and on about the language, but there is a ton of sloppy language in a lot of these, art first channels. And I mean, it's not actually too different from many other things. Like if you look at how like science people, how they...
You really have to tell me what we means. And what do you mean by commodity, right? Like, most people understood. And if you want to have a conversation about that, and if it sparks conversations about what I say, perfect. That's what I want. The whole idea that I have to spoon feed you every single bits of information and that you can't think for yourself, and maybe create your own ideas through the conversation that I have, like when you, and I'll compare my videos to poetry. You know, when you read poetry or you read, you know, any essays, do you like, what does he mean by that? Or what does he mean by this? Is it necessarily a criticism of the person who wrote either that poem or that essay, or is it an opportunity to discuss it with other people who've also read this piece of poetry or this essay? I don't think me not saying that or not expanding on that takes away from the video. When I say we are brought up in a commodified world, making it hard to dissociate the commodity from you know, an artwork, or an artwork from a commodity, I don't even remember what I said. I think that was pretty good, you know? If you want to add nuance, yeah, discuss it with your friends. You have 2 other friends that you can discuss that with. And it's not a failing on my part. I don't think so. Let's listen to that again.
Tendency
Makes the price of a
I feel like he's only asking, what does he mean by we? Because he doesn't necessarily agree with what I'm saying. Because everything before, I didn't put as much detail. I didn't put detail as much as I did in the last sentence. But the last sentence he might have disagreed with. So he's like, all right, well, what does he mean by that?
work at $2 million.
And when he says that's
Purchase them.
Let's
However, had anybody known these were Banksy works, the kiosk would have been empty in a matter of seconds. However, this old man sold Banksy's artworks to people who liked them, either for themselves or to offer as gifts. If Banksy had sold them, he wouldn't have sold artworks but investments, high-value commodities. Again, to some people, that's great. An artwork can be both great as an artwork and as an investment. But to other people, Banksy included, this can hinder our ability to appreciate art. I would argue that because we are brought up in a commodified world, we cannot dissociate the value of a work of art and its price tag. So when the bourgeoisie estimates the price of a work at $2 million,
Yeah, that's called commodity fetishization, isn't it? Isn't it? It might fetishize. I know it's bringing up another author aside from me, so I don't have to, like, I didn't come up with the whole idea of commodity fetishism. The term commodity fetishism describes the economic relations of production and exchange as being social relations that exist among things, money and merchandise, and also relationships that exist among people. So we see art as, you know, a relationship that exists among things, you know, money and merchandise, and not as a relationship that exists among people, as like more of a, you know, as a social you know, object, instead of being an object of exchange. When we see art, it's really hard to not perceive it as an object of exchange, because of commodity fetishism. I think. Disagree with me if you think I'm wrong with that.
$1 million.
and when he says that's nothing like words like we, what exactly is he referring to? Like he himself can't do it? Is he talking about like a social tendency? When he says cannot, like, is that like definitively cannot, or are we just talking about a tendency in society? You know, it's just like a lot of like sloppy language. I guess, I mean, I could keep going on and on about the language, but there is a ton of sloppy language in a lot of these, you know, art first channels. And I mean, it's not actually too different from many other things. Like if you look at how like science people, how they communicate, that tends to be a problem. Like very recently, there was this row between Robert Kennedy Jr. and some, you know, like doctor, like a, you know, who's like talking about vaccination publicly, who refuses to debate. And it's like, why? You know, like, is it really because you know, like verbally, you know, like a scientist and even artists or even like writers themselves, very often when it comes to actual discussion, they don't really cultivate that ability.
It's hard to not have that impair our
There's a difference. The ability to debate is not for everyone either. Sounds very debate bro-y. Like, oh, if you can't debate or argue your position, then your position has, you know, no credence. Do these people talk to other people at all? This doctor didn't want to debate it, perhaps because there's a difficulty in debating conspiracy theorists, especially about, like, for example, vaccination, or, you know, it can be flat earth. Like, I'm not a debater, and I would have a hard time debating a flat earther. Not because there's credence to the idea of flat earth, is because they will bring up arguments that I have no idea how to debunk on the flat earth. Even if I understood everything about, you know, the earth being a sphere and everything, this person will take out an argument out of fucking nowhere, you know, to argue for flat Earth, and I'll be like, where did that come from? Right? And how do you debate against people who with a completely different, like, you know, who live in a completely different reality? It's really, really hard. It doesn't necessarily mean that their position doesn't have any credence, right? Especially in the case of that doctor. Like, imagine you're a doctor working on vaccines or whatever, and then you talk about your work and what you do, and then someone tries to debate you on the validity of your work, and you're like, that sounds like a waste of time. No, I'm not going to do that. And then people are like, well, why not? Do you have something to hide? And the guy's like, I'm not prepared to debate that. I don't want to debate that. Well, you have to want to debate that, or else you're hiding something. Imagine being a scientist but not having rhetoric. Whew. Big L, big L.
Our judgment. However, that $2 million price tag is not about the work of art in itself. It's about how much this work can be worth in the future and how much you as a buyer can gain from it. And this is extremely harmful for artists, either the ones who are beginning or the ones who don't plan on having an international career. The art market promotes the idea of investing in art, of spending with the idea of reselling for a higher price. If you buy a painting from a local artist solely because you really like it, you might not be able to resell it for its original value. Honestly, you might not be able to resell it at all, and to the art market, that's a bad investment. It comes to no surprise that the art market has little to nothing to do with art and more with wealth, speculation, and investment. I think a true collector, someone who genuinely appreciates art, can buy an artwork from someone who's completely
Why do you refuse to discuss with someone in bad faith about whether or not your work, backed by tons of studies, is actually legitimate and not a master plan to kill people? Why would you not do that? You have something to hide? Are you actually meaning to kill a lot of people?
known, and it wouldn't matter to them because they bought the art not for the name, not for the return on investment, but for the work in itself. If you buy a work of art to later profit from it, no matter what they tell you, you're not buying a work of art. You're placing money on a nice looking investment. So I started this video by talking about how both Cobain
Should have done this a long time ago. Hold on. Is that better?
and Banksy were stuck in the same trap. But what is this trap exactly? Banksy's greatest anti-art market stunt was, without a doubt, his shredding of the girl with balloon. In a nutshell, if you haven't heard about it, this work of art destroyed itself after being sold at auction. Banksy protested against the art market by destroying his work of art after it was sold. If you ask me, it's an incredible idea, but just like with Kurt Cobain, it would just add value to the commodity. When Cobain protested against MTV, he empowered MTV. When Banksy protests against the art market, he empowers the art market. This is the trap. No matter how much you protest the thing you hate, your protest won't only be unsuccessful, but detrimental to your goal. As Fisher wrote,
Yeah, exactly. Here, pyroanarchist with a completely made-up ideology that makes absolutely no sense, called pyroanarchism. She says, Mr. Terminal, why won't you debate me on pyroanarchism? Are you scared? According to these guys, I should be debating pyroanarchist on pyroanarchism.
Here, even success meant failure, since to succeed would only mean that you were the new meat on which the system could feed. Banksy is immensely successful, and if Banksy is the new meat on which the system can feed, Banksy is a feast.
Like, this is good. Am I wrong? This is a good video. This is a banger. Wow.
And
I mean, like, talking about all this, like, it makes me wonder, is the implication that non-commodified art is going to be necessarily better? Because, you know, it perhaps is going to be more diverse, right? And more places for art to come from. But it being, you know, better or worse is not necessarily, you know, very clear to me, right? It's just going to be different. And, you know, stuff like, you know, Banksy shredding the artwork as a protest. The issue is that, you know, it's no longer there.
I think there's, like, as I've talked about how if art was decommodified, for example, which would be extremely hard to do. But if it was decommodified, I don't think necessarily, like he says, it would be different, but not necessarily better or good. I think it would be good. And, you know, I'm happy that this video sparks these conversations and these, you know, these thoughts. That's exactly what I want. And I don't want, that's exactly what I want. And I don't want people to just go, all right, I agree or I disagree, or like he's asking for nuance, but through him asking for nuance, he's actually engaging with the discussion, which to me is the most important. Like I didn't really talk about if it would be make it better or worse for art to be decommodified. But in this case, I think it will. And the reason for that is because art that would be decommodified would unburden ourselves into getting art or perceiving art through the price tag that it gets on the art market. It's basically just, the art market being destroyed, like all the bads of the art market. It, elevating certain artists to a status of legends solely because of the price tag that they fetch. You don't have that anymore. The pressure of acquiring an artwork because of the price tag that it is, or that it has, also taking off, right? Seen as an exchange, like an object of exchange instead of an object of an art object is another positive. There might be some negatives as well, but it's a good conversation to have. And I'm happy that they're having it.
There, right? Like it's like people should be much more concerned about actually producing, right? Getting stuff out there, getting their poems written, getting their books written, getting their paintings done. All this other stuff is just like a total sideshow, right? Nobody here is like really talking about, the actual work ethic. People are getting like so caught up on all these like outside issues. Like, is this a spectacle? Is it not a spectacle? And it's like, why don't you just actually do the thing and make it worthwhile? Like if it's
all right, I'm not gonna say it's fascist, but a lot of people, like, it just sounds like very unintellectual. The whole idea, like, why do people have to think about everything? Why don't they just act? Why don't they just do, why don't they just start making art instead of, having to, talking all the time and not actually producing any art? And it's like, these conversations, I believe, are important, don't you? Don't you think that these conversations are important? I don't do art. And many people that watch me on the canvas don't do art either. Maybe they don't want to, or maybe they do. And, they're just not, they're just taking a break from doing art. It's not like you either have these conversations or you do art. You can't do both. I'm not putting you on top.
Additive. Nobody here is like really talking about, the actual work ethic.
And this video is not about the work ethic of doing art. This video is about Banksy, Kurt Cobain, and the paradox that claimed them. All right? Nothing to do with, again, the criticism is this video is not what I want this video to be about.
People are getting like so caught up on all these like outside issues. Like, is this a spectacle? Is it not a spectacle? And it's like, why don't you just actually do the thing and make it worthwhile? Like if it's additive, if this is all additive in some way, why would it matter, right? What other kind of like categories that you could attach it to, right? The bottom line is, if an artwork is additive, the only way that it could be additive is that there's something worthwhile within it, right? So if Banksy had a worthwhile painting in Bad Balloon,
why discuss the influence of art and its philosophical and social implications when you can just do art?
Girl or whatever, by virtue of it being destroyed, that is, forget about like it being like a trolling of art buyers. Like if you really created a great work of art and you stand on it as being a great work of art, destroying it is a negative quality, obviously.
This is not only true for,
but its destruction is part of the art. I don't know if I followed what he said exactly. Maybe I should ask for precisions because he's using sloppy language there. But yeah, no, I feel like destroying it is part of the work of art. I mean, it definitely is.
For art, social movements and even anti-capitalist ideas can be incorporated by capitalism and resold to us. The art market knows that Banksy is going to criticize it. The billionaires buying Banksy art know that Banksy will criticize them, and they love it. The art market and billionaires don't see these attacks as dangerous. Why not? Banksy's stunt was one of the largest stunts in art history. We have one of the most successful artists in the world completely and publicly rejecting the main institution of the art world, the art market. It's a huge deal with little to no impact. The reason why Banksy's criticism is not only ineffective but beneficial to the art market is because it's all a spectacle. Events, experiences, and art are commodified and sold to us. They become a spectacle, a show comparable to a Netflix movie. Our relation to these events can often feel detached, mostly because they are sold to us almost as fiction. The mediation between us and the world through images creates this alienating disconnection. Kurt Cobain killed himself. This, relayed through mass media, is sold to us. It's used to grab our attention. It becomes a spectacle. This degradation of the real in favor of the spectacle is what makes everything feel like a show, like it's all fake. When seeing Banksy's girl with balloon being shredded as it's being
I wonder if they disagree or if they're like, that's not bad. I'm listening to this, I'm like, yeah, that's not bad. Of course, I wrote it. But they're not adding to it, so they're either bored or they have nothing to add to it, or maybe, they're agreeing.
bought for several hundreds of thousands of dollars, we see it like we would see a harmless performance in a circus. It's being sold to us as such. The critique becomes a spectacle, and the spectacle, not the critique, becomes the content. No matter what Banksy does, it will be commodified. Banksy has become a spectacle the same way Cobain did. No matter what they do, whatever they say, that will contribute to their value as commodities. Cobain knew that he was just another piece of spectacle, that nothing runs better on MTV than a protest against MTV. Banksy is just another piece of spectacle. Nothing runs better in the art world than a protest against the art world. Everything Banksy does will become an element of the spectacle and, therefore, a commodity to be advertised and sold. The painting being shredded is part of the spectacle. Banksy's anonymous identity is part of the spectacle. Graffiti is part of the spectacle. When Banksy and only Banksy does illegal graffiti, it's acceptable, it's funny, it's part of the show. Cobain and Banksy were turned into spectacles to a point where their protests or their rage became meaningless. Their acts were just spectacles, entertainment bits that are packaged and sold to us just like any other commodity is. This commodification of these performances, these experiences.
All right, for people joining the stream, they're like, why is Mr. Canvas just listening to his own video on stream? Just sounds a bit weird. There's commentators in the corner. Right over there. In the corner over there, there's commentators, okay? I promise.
And these artists make me worry. Kurt Cobain was so well integrated to MTV culture that even when he criticized MTV, he participated in that culture. Banksy is so well integrated in the art world that even when they criticize the art world, they participate in its culture. How can an artist possibly criticize any institution in which they have been so well integrated with? Doesn't that rob the artist from their power? What would Banksy have to do to really harm the art world and its market? Well, they couldn't make any artwork because that would contribute to the art world culture of criticizing the art world. But what if they stopped making art? Well, that could also contribute to the mystery and myth of Banksy, the spectacle. Banksy is trapped. As long as they're an artist in the public eye, they'll participate, contribute, and empower the very thing they hate without any chance of meaningfully criticizing.
And here's where he goes wrong. It's assuming that Banksy doesn't know this. And for number one, Banksy is not likely one person. I've read many things where Banksy is probably a group of 2 or 3 artists that.
Yeah, Banksy could be a group. And of course, I think Banksy knows that. Yeah. I'm not saying that Banksy doesn't know it. Banksy is a victim, and I'm exposing Banksy's poor condition. Banksy watching this video, going, "That's me. I am trapped. I am in the spectacle. I am a spectacle." Like, of course he knows that. Yeah, he assumed that Mr. Canvas assumed that.
Empower the very thing they hate without any chance of meaningfully criticizing.
And here's where he goes wrong. It's assuming that Banksy doesn't know this. And for number one, Banksy is not likely one person. I've read many things where Banksy is probably a group of 2 or 3 artists that use the moniker Banksy. So it's not a single individual. But he makes it as if this supposed concern that he has, is something that motivated Cobain and Banksy. And there's no evidence of that. It's all for the shock value and whatnot, and that's from the very first time 25, 30 years ago when Banksy first became known, and Cobain a little bit before that. So this whole assumption that he had that's behind this video is again a false one.
Yeah, and again, like I just keep asking myself
that I think that Banksy doesn't know that. Of course, I know Banksy knows that. Maybe Banksy enjoys it. Maybe Banksy actually capitalizes on it. I don't give a fuck. He's still trapped in it. They're still trapped in it. Whatever. It doesn't take away from my point. Like, what if, they're trapped in it, but they like that trap? It's a comfortable trap. It's a trap with, that's plated in gold.
So, like, who cares? Like, to the extent that, this is, it all becomes meaningless. Like, the only reason why Banksy or Kurt Cobain would be meaningless is if their music, right, or their artwork is just not sufficient, right? Or if there's, like, not enough people that are able to, like, articulate why it works. Apparently, he can't even do that, right? I mean, he himself said that I'm more interested in the cognition aspect of all this, which is why it's all context driven. Like, and a lot of this, honestly, like, it just strikes.
He's more interested in the cognition aspect of it. Look at this loser, this nerd who likes context to his artworks.
Me as, especially these final comments of his, they strike me as somebody is almost like justifying to himself why he would not go become an artist, right? Because, like, first of all, if you want to be a great artist, it's very difficult, and there's not much compensation there, right? It's not like having a YouTube channel, and he's kind of like trying to justify almost to himself, like, look how trapped they are, and they are supposed to be at the top of their game.
And
No. Whoa, I got psychoanalyzed. we got an assumer in here. He's assuming. No, I am a great artist. I'm gonna make a segment about. I'm gonna make a segment about the art that I made. I talked about it in the past stream. It's gonna be on Germinal if you want to go check it out. Hello, Mildred Seashells. We got a couple of people joining right now. It's me watching a video being of people reacting to me. They really hate me. I don't know why. But no. I'm not saying, oh, I would never be an artist because I'd be trapped. Here, like like perhaps they haven't done enough cognition, because they don't see the value in it. But I see the value in it. And here, I'm not trying to cope about my own situation. This is not necessarily about me. This is about the broader system of capitalism that I love to criticize, and how capitalism may have bad impacts. Ballet made fun of me. How capitalism has huge impacts on the way we perceive art and how artists perform within the art world. And I think that's that's an important discussion to have. Not only for the artists, but also for people who enjoy art under capitalism. This is not about me. This is about the conversation of art and capitalism that I believe is a conversation that's worth having and discussing. And the amount of people who watched the video, who engaged with the video, who liked it, I think prove that there is a need to have that conversation. Perhaps you don't believe there's a need to have that discussion, and then that's okay. You just don't have to participate. Nobody's forcing you to participate in that conversation. If you just want to make art, and if people talk about art in its social context, and you're like, okay, well, if they talk about art in its social context, that must mean that they're like repressed artists. Ballet was in the corner over there going like this. Basically making fun of me and imitating the way I speak with my hand gesturing. Ballet is not better than these three guys. Though the person in the middle didn't really talk at all during that video. My guess is he's fucking loving it. And he's like, damn. He's like, I wish I could be on the side of Mr. Germinal or Mr. Canvas right now instead of being on the side of these assumers.
the thing is, my comment that I read earlier, I ended it by saying this to him. And as I type, you have almost 30,000 views in a day, mimicking other YouTube narrators and complaining about a problem that, at least for your two victims, is not really a problem. And how much will you get from YouTube for this shallow and disingenuous take? Are you trapped, or is it you that has YouTube in a snare?
I do think there's a trap as well within YouTube, though less, there are some negative aspects of YouTube, and I've talked about them before. I don't think I'm trapped. But for example, I know that if I don't do a specific type of video that, my subscribers want, then I'm not going to get any money anymore. So I'm still trapped in the sense that my expression and my ways of making videos are determined by what the viewers, or what I perceive what my viewers want. And no, I don't make a lot of money on this. I definitely don't make a lot of money off of YouTube. Let me tell you that.
There's nothing that he's saying that is in any way any kind of an issue, except as a faux issue presented to again get him clickbait.
Yeah.
If none of this is an issue to you, then you're not particularly welcomed in the conversation. I mean, you can participate in the conversation, but if you don't think this is an issue, if you don't see how this is part of the conversation on capitalism and art, and how capitalism affects the way art is perceived and produced, if you don't see an issue in that, if you don't see an issue on how even, you can't criticize capitalism through art anymore, because capitalism will absorb this criticism of itself in art, I feel like that's an extremely important conversation to have. If to you that's not important, then go do art. What are you doing? What are you doing having that conversation? Go do art, I guess. Keep writing your poems or whatever.
Using words like trap, like it just makes me think like trapped according to who?
Right.
Who's trapped and why, right? And like it's sort of
Who's trapped and why. The whole video was about how who's trapped? It's Kurt Cobain and Banksy. Why are they trapped? Because they can't criticize the system that they want to criticize, because their criticisms are absorbed. Like, I feel like you either don't understand my video, or you purposefully are trying to act as if I didn't present my point good enough, because you just want to criticize the video for the sake of criticizing it to get some clicks and views. Did it work? Okay, no, it didn't work. Sorry about that. You make a bunch of money off of YouTube with your videos and your funny voice. Let's leech off this person who makes a bunch of videos with a lot of money and a lot of views. Let's leech off what they say and try to make a lot of views and a lot of money off of it. Or you think that these conversations are important to have. If you think that these conversations are important to have, good. But don't just act like, oh, this is all worthless. This has no meaning. Then why the fuck are you there? What are you doing? You're only doing it for the clicks? You're only doing it for the views? You're only doing it for the money? No, you do think that these conversations are have some kind of relevancy. Anyway.
works at the beginning if he's talking about Kurt Cobain, because at least there's like the specter of the suicide or whatever. But for Banksy, you think Banksy's trapped, right? He's like, whoever he or they are, multimillionaires, get tons of, has like a reputation, right? Nobody's trapped, right? It's just.
All right. These are people who have never tasted success. You can be very successful and still feel trapped within that success. You can be very miserable within that success. And you know what? I'm not saying that Banksy is necessarily miserable, because you can be very happy and still feel stuck, right? I'll give you an example, totally unrelated to the world of the arts, right? I met this priest once, and that priest was gay, but he couldn't live his homosexuality because he was a priest. However, he didn't want to leave priesthood because it was all the prestige, all the money, everything that was associated to his job gave him happiness. But some parts of it he couldn't be happy with. Some parts of priesthood he couldn't be happy with. Mainly because he was, as I said, extremely gay. Now, he was wealthy. He had a car that was paid for him, a really nice car. He had, the house that was paid for him. He had the influence with, many, many other rich people in the town that we were in. He had everything to be happy. He was successful. Yet he felt trapped. In this case, it was because of homosexuality, because he was very gay, as I said. However, what if you have an ideological need to criticize the systems, for example, that you live within, and you can't do it? You have everything else, but your teeth, your claws, you're declawed, you're defanged, because now you can do art and you can be very successful at it. You can make a lot of money, great, but the impact that you want your art to have, you can't have. You want your art to be able to change the world. You want your art to change and to make people rethink capitalism, but it doesn't. It fortifies capitalism. And you think that an artist who wants to, through their art, make people rethink of capitalism, yet fails at that, but that because that artist makes a lot of money, then he has nothing to complain about. That artist must be happy. He's successful. Well, let me tell you, success doesn't necessarily make you happy. And success doesn't necessarily make you feel like you've accomplished your goals. Maybe one day you'll be successful. Maybe. And through that success, if you can't achieve your goals despite your success, we'll talk about, being able to complain or being, trapped.
Banksy, you think Banksy's trapped, right? He's like, whoever he or they are, multimillionaires, get tons of, has like a reputation, right? Nobody's trapped, right? It's just like a word. It's like a totally made up word that somebody's like using now to, get at everything other than the thing itself, which is the production of work over and over and over again. I like how he like presents like even if you do believe that you're in some way like trapped by capitalism, he presents this idea of a great artist just like suddenly stopping work as a solution to something. A solution to what? Like, what would that be a solution to? Some made up problem in his own head,
I never said that if Banksy stopped making art, it would solve the problem. Far from it. I said that if Banksy stopped making art, it would contribute to the spectacle, to the whole myth of Banksy. Oh my God, where did he go? Or where did they go? Right? That's why I said he's trapped. He can't escape it. No matter what he does, there's this mystery, there's this spectacle about it. Hello, Quello-san. I'm happy that you think this is really interesting stuff. I also believe that this conversation is interesting. They don't. And despite that, they make the conversation interesting. They're trapped. They're trapped in a paradox. By trying to tell people, hey, this conversation isn't interesting, isn't worth having, they make this conversation happen. And that's the whole, what a perfect loop, right? A perfect, everything goes perfect circle or whatever.
I'm not sure if Zeke,
I'll confess, this is the first time I've seen this video all the way through, but I mean, I think you're all right. I'm just not sure what this video adds or what it's supposed to do. Like, it seems to like lionize the idea of being self-aware about your inability to do anything in the art world and its commodification. And all you can do is just sort of make these sort of ineffectual, gimmicky spectacles. But wouldn't the real sort of rebellion would be to focus on producing great art?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody's doing that. Nobody's doing that.
That would be the actual sort of countercultural idea. But again, this guy, he doesn't go into what constitutes quality art and what the art of Cobain was, or what the art of... I
think Banksy's art is quality. I think him destroying his painting is absolutely great. I don't know what you would define as what quality art is. When I think of, people who see aesthetics as quality, I think of someone who makes like a beautiful, a beautiful landscape a la Bierstadt, how do you write Bierstadt painting, When I think of someone who says, oh, beautiful, like, great masterworks, that's what I think, All right, but Banksy does that, and it's like, okay. That's what I think when I think that, when these people say great works. I may be wrong, great works are only, about beauty and aesthetics. Banksy
is, and maybe how, in fact, the art may have contributed to sort of this endless cycle of spectacle and commercialization. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, I think Dan's original comment was like, you don't go into the art of Nirvana or how it's successful. And I think that's probably the most important part, because that's what they did for a living. And this sort of discussion just oversteps that completely to talk about capitalism in this way that I think most educated people in the world can understand. And again, like, and this whole thing is monetized. So like, what is he doing? Is he just sort of, is he not contributing to the same commercialization? And
I'm also trapped. See, as I said, you can't escape it. You can't escape it, friend. And yeah, you're like, oh, he talks about, capitalism in a way that, every educated person will understand. Well, good. I'm happy I did. And I'm happy that, it's a video with a lot, like, to you, it may sound obvious, but to many people, it's not necessarily, 330,000 views. So 330,000 people have watched this video. And many of them have never actually engaged with the whole conversation about art versus, capitalism and the intersection between both. I think it's important conversations to have, even on the introductory level, as I'm presenting. Maybe they're angry because it's introductory level. I don't know. They seem really angry at it, but I'm having a hard time understanding why. Maybe they should script their criticism and come back to me after.
Ineffectual conversation about art and all that. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, he would say, "I'm trapped too."
I'm trapped. Yeah, we're all trapped.
That would be a humble brag, right? I'm trapped. I'm trapped with like over 1 million subscribers, right?
Yeah.
Over 1 million. Holy shit! I hope. Wait, did he say? It's coming. It's coming. We're almost at 500. Okay, 500,000
and all that. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, he would say, "I'm trapped too."
I'm trapped. Yeah, we're all trapped.
That would be a humble brag, right? I'm trapped. I'm trapped with like over 1 million subscribers, right?
No, I don't have one over 1 billion. No. I only have 450,000. But it's true though. Like, humble brag or not, again, success doesn't breed happiness, or it doesn't breed, the necessary influence that you want to bring in the world, And yeah, I make money off of that. They're just poets. They say a lot of words with little to say. No, that's just mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And we said about,
but usually it's little words with lots to say. That's poets. That's what I enjoy poetry for. A lot to say, but with little words. Not a lot of words with a little to say.
The ultimate act of...
A lot of words with a little to say are streamers. Us, me, and these people.
Rebelling the arts. Yeah, I mean, that is true. Like, think about how, so many like young kids would be looking for, what would be countercultural, and hard work is not considered very sexy. It's considered a very boring response to that question. And yet it is in fact the ultimate response, isn't it? Right. The production of good quality work, no matter the genre, no matter the aesthetic preoccupations, just to continue. I mean, like even like my channel name, Automachination, part of that, it's part of that idea, right? This kind of process of, just keep going, keep doing. And eventually, things take a life of their own.
Hey, that's exactly what I was saying. Keep going, keep, be consistent in the work that you do in terms of like for YouTube, at least. No, but like, I understand hard work not being countercultural, because very often hard work is synonymous with working for a boss, working, within the system, and just, shutting up or shutting the fuck up, and just, obeying orders and doing the work of, the people above you in the hierarchy. So not very countercultural, but there is work to be done, and that can be very valuable and very rewarding, and can bring about counterculture. Obviously, automatications is the kind of hard work, I'm sure, that is very rewarding. The canvas is something that's very rewarding. Germinal is work that is very rewarding. The whole project of the artist residency that I have is very rewarding, but it requires a lot of work. I agree with that. It's just not the kind of work that, is that we conceptualize within capitalism. Also, okay, I apologize to poets. Comparing these people to actual poets might be mean, yes. I think Ezekiel was kind of cool. I think I could have good conversations with Alex as well. Dan, well, he might be busy with all the boxes and all. He might be moving from a place to another, so we're gonna let him, whatever.
All right, so this is what we did here for Artifact 41. Does anybody have any closing comments on what we just saw, the massacres that we just witnessed?
I guess
the massacres.
read that. There was I sent you a link to something called Empire of the Mind.
Yeah.
And, like stories of old, this is like an Indian fellow who tries to be all stuff. I mentioned polyphonic fiction beast is another bad writing site. Cinema cartography is a husband and wife.
Hale Foundry.
Hale Foundry is another one. Was a guy I was arguing. He just got real big.
Hey, cinema cartography. That's the person we watched a video of 2 days ago that we thought was kind of proto-fascist. Let's go through what he's getting
I sent you a link to something called Empire of the Mind.
Yeah.
And, like stories of old, this is like an Indian fellow who tries to be all stuff. I mentioned polyphonic fiction.
Wait, Polly, is that our friend? Like Stories of Old, is that the Indian fellow? Because Like Stories of Old is not Indian at all. I've spoken to Like Stories. He's really, really cool. We were in a Discord call, and I've even shown him, and he's gonna think it's weird, so please don't send this clip to him. But my girlfriend was next to me, my partner was next to me, and I was like, I pointed to Tom, who's like Stories of Old, and I said, look how cute he is. Not cute in the sense of attractive. Well, you know, he can be attractive too. That's subjective, but he's objectively like, you want to hug him, you know? Anyway.
Fiction Beast is another bad writing site. Cinema
Oh, Polyphonic. Okay, it's not, what's his name? Poly Blank. Okay, that's someone else.
Cartography is a husband and wife duo.
Hale Foundry.
Hale Foundry is another one. Was a guy I was arguing. He just got real bitchy with me in the comments. I just bitch slapped him. So yeah, I mean, you got.
I think this guy's the definition of what an internet troll is.
Some good points. The only comment, I guess, that Shy's fellow, he's just always been that way, and he's the only one who's not really an artist or in the arts. These other guys, but it was such a terrible take on art criticism or criticism in general that, you know, God.
Well, he might not be an artist, but I do think his approach is sort of emblematic of how all these people, whether they're in the arts or not, when we look at that definition of what a critic does, that's never their sort of primary approach, right? It's always about it, whether it's through appeals to emotion or it's, you know, artist and capitalism. It never really seems to be about the evaluation and analysis of what the art is and what it's doing.
Like most of my videos are about imagine this guy bitch slaps you. I would not want to get bitch slapped by this guy.
I mean, I guess that's my take on it.
Most of my videos are analyzing art. This was one of the rare ones where I don't.
Well, this has been Artifact number 41.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. We might watch the one but later. There's also one here. That's about me and Taxi Driver. A whole 46 minutes of me being wrong about Taxi Driver. So we'll look into that. I mean, they probably. Oh, YouTube doesn't get Banksy and Kurt Cobain. Oh, was that that might have been the segment. I should have watched that instead. Anyway, I mean, they want my attention. They got it, and we'll watch that. It was good. It was good. It was a good conversation to have. You know, they might not always be in good faith, but it's always important and you know, productive to discuss and reiterate certain points. I think they're trying to create content, and they might not be the most experienced in content creation, which is fine. And they're trying out, and you know, all being said, it's not too bad. Some criticisms could have a bit more, you know, a bit more focused, I could say. They picked the two videos that aren't about specific artworks and then complain about it not being about art. What? I know, right? Yeah, also kind of weird that they think that art critique is only valid if it's about the quality and technique of the artwork. Sounds like people who don't want to do research about specific artworks. Next stream, we're going to play Pajama Sam 2, and we're going to watch their second video on me on Taxi Driver.